I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Governing Board for Scottsdale Unified School District. Today is October 7th, 2014. Time is 5 p.m. Begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Brown, would you help us with that, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll have a roll call beginning with Mr. Jackson, please.
George Jackson.
Pam Kirby. Barbara Perleberg.
Denny Brown.
And Bonnie Sneed. All members are present. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Oh, there we go. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. At this time, would Dr. Peterson please student and staff recognition and celebrations. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and welcome everyone tonight. It's hard to believe we are just a few days away from October break and the end of our first 9-week first quarter, so time is moving very quickly this year. Our celebration this evening is Dr. Mitch Von Echten is going to recognize our 4 grand prize winners from the Mayor's Constitution Day contest. Overall, we had 16 recognees in Scottsdale schools, but Dr. Von Echten, I believe, will be recognizing the 4 grand prize winners.
Yes, I will. Thank you very much, Dr. Peterson. Madam President and governing board members, it's my honor tonight to recognize the Mayor's Constitution Day Contest Grand Prize winners. To commemorate Constitution Day, the Honorable W.J. Jim Lane hosted a Mayor's Constitution Day contest. The City of Scottsdale received 132 entries for the contest. Scottsdale Unified School District had 4 grand prize winners and several finalists. The grand prize winners are Gabe Ozaki, a student at Desert Canyon Middle School, 6th to 8th grade essay winner. Cameron Sliger, a student at Desert Canyon Middle School, 6th to 8th grade art winner. Stephen Adelberg, a student at Desert Mountain High School essay winner. And Julia Myonis, a student at Chaparral High School art school winner. The high school art winner, SUSD had 17 finalists from Pueblo, Desert Canyon Middle, Mojave, Chaparral, Coronado, and Desert Mountain. A complete list of names of our finalists can be found on the SUSD website and the individual school websites. And I believe tonight we have in our presence Stephen Adelberg. Is that correct? Stephen, are you here with us? Where are you? Come on up.
Stephen, thank you much for being here.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
At this time, we'll take public comment. This is the portion of the governing board meeting when we invite the public to make comments. Although not required to do so, the governing board values the input of the community, so we feel it's an important part of communication with our stakeholders. As explained on the cover of the agenda, anyone wishing to address the governing board will fill out and submit a blue card for non-agenda matters and a white card for agenda matters. Please submit cards to the board secretary, Mrs. Como, before the at this time. For non-agenda matters, please take note that action taken as a result of this kind of public comment will be limited to responding to any criticism made by those who have addressed the governing board, or we could direct staff to look into the matter or ask that the matter be put on a future agenda. Pursuant to ARS 38-431.01G, no other discussion or legal action is allowed. For agenda matters, please indicate your desire to speak and list the item number on the white card. Please approach the microphone when your name is called and in the order called. All public comments are limited to a 3-minute speaking limit, and Vice President Brown will hold up cards indicating the time remaining. In all cases, public comment is subject to reasonable subject matter, place, and manner restrictions. Please word your comments so that they're not defamatory or disrespectful in nature. The first comment card is Katie Root. Hold on one second, make sure that we have microphone for you.
I love technology. Thank you.
The
That's all right. It
recorder-
got me a good start going here.
Thanks.
Governing Board President Sneed and the Governing Board members, Dr. Peterson and Sandra. I'm here tonight to be the voice of the elementary principals. And as you can see, and you take a look in the audience, the principals here are in support of the message I'm about to share with you today. We would like the Governing Board members to know that we support the idea of empowerment of the leaders. Our leaders are dedicated experts that do their jobs very, very well. There is no greater evidence of that than the A rating we received by the State Department of Education. Our leaders, who are experts in the educational field, are the very people the Governing Board should be listening to and publicly supporting. Empowering leaders sets the stage for continuous improvement and greatness. We would also like the Governing Board to know that the elementary principals do not support the goal of decentralizing SUSD as it was presented at last Thursday's study session. We believe it will erode the unification we've worked so hard to achieve. Decentralization will lead to the inequities within the district, compromise the collaborative nature of the schools, negatively change the climate of SUSD, and ultimately have an adverse effect on the entire operations of the district. Sustaining a unified organizational structure is critical to continued student success. The structure of school districts are not the same as businesses. They cannot operate as such, and to do so will only serve to fracture what is currently a highly functioning and productive school district. We are not broken, and we don't need to be fixed. We are unified, and we wish to remain that way. During the study session, there was a comment made about Dr. McNeil in reference to his leadership. It takes courage to be an effective leader because oftentimes it means voicing what needs to be heard. Dr. McNeil showed courage by speaking up and advocating for his elementary principals. He voiced our concerns and shared our viewpoints. His leadership is exactly what administrators value in their supervisor and professional relationships. He empowers principals to sustain a culture of learning, expresses the confidence in our abilities to perform in a professional capacity, and he inspires us to achieve towards greatness. Lastly, he reminds us to always, always remain focused on our students. Dr. McNeil is a champion of learning. He is a master coach, a facilitator, and a problem solver. He frames all his conversations around how to support administrators, teachers, and students so they can perform at their best. Dr. McNeil is exactly the type of leader that will keep SUSD moving forward in the quest for being the #1 district in the world. He has our full and unrevocable trust and support. I would offer that collectively there is more talent, more dedication, and more spirit sitting in this audience tonight with any other district in the state. We invite the Governing Board to visit our schools, gain insight directly from the principals who are from our eyes and ears to the school community, to trust their experts in this room, and respectfully support the administrators that have so far led SUSD year after year in a very successful manner. In summary, we support empowerment and autonomy of our schools within the context of a unified structure. We support Dr. McNeil, the SLT leadership team, and Dr. Peterson. We will continue to support each other in a collaborative nature that promotes a culture of learning and learning opportunities for all. We hope that you will do the same. Thank you for this opportunity
Thank you,
to
Ms.
speak
Rick.
tonight.
Les Holland.
Thank you. My name is Les Holland. My wife, Dr. Marfa Holland, retired in 2012. She had taught at Arcadia for almost 30 years. In her last 2 years, she was chairman of the English department. Each of you have a handout of 3 pages. Back in the year 2000, Marfa came home from the first day of school where they had a highly paid speaker. She was all excited about a new book called Choice Theory, A New Psychology of Personal Freedom by Dr. William Glasser, MD. My wife and I read the book. In 2002, I paid $500 for 3 days training. In 2008, Arcadia paid for my wife to have the basic intensive training. In 2011, I completed the requirements for certification, Choice Theory Reality Therapy certification. As a part of that, each candidate has to present a 20-minute presentation on some area of Dr. Glasser's works. I chose his work on education in Choice Theory Chapter 10. More than half the students in the best schools do nothing more than get by. I had heard many years of my wife telling me what students had not already learned by the time she got them as seniors. On the next page, Dr. Glasser says about students that just get by, the actual figure in the best schools is closer to 25%. I did original research that verified these numbers. That was my presentation. It's a 20-minute PowerPoint in case you're interested. To improve the education of students, I recommend a book by E.D. Hirsch, The New First Dictionary of Cultural Literacy. That's the core knowledge people out of Virginia. They've been doing this for 20 years. The book is what your child needs to know by the end of the 6th grade. If you're serious about No Child Left Behind, put in the hands of all teachers, 4th graders and up, a copy of this book. The second page of the handout are a few slides from my 20-minute presentation that is a preview of my free 12-hour course, Choice Theory, Understanding Yourself and Others. The board and the superintendent and his staff were invited to a class last January. No one attended. I offer again 2 20-minute presentations and a free 12-hour course. The outline of the course is the 3rd page. If you have any questions, it has my name, my phone number, and my email. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person, Martin Helmer.
Good evening. My name is Martin Helmer. I'm the father of a pre-K student at Cheyenne Elementary, or Cheyenne Traditional School, rather. We understand that tonight the board will be deciding whether or not, or we'll be talking about the issue of whether or not the pre-K students at Cheyenne will be automatically be enrolled in kindergarten, or whether they'll have to enter the lottery system for that purpose. My wife will be speaking sometime after me. She'll cover some of the more relevant points. However, I want to read a letter from our attorney concerning this topic, a copy of which I'll leave behind with the board this evening. Dear members of the board, I represent Peyton Helmer, a pre-K student at Cheyenne, and her parents Martin and Kristin Helmer. I am concerned about your attempt to take action to place Peyton and others similarly situated into a lottery for kindergarten. Under your own rules and on your website, the following language appears. Once the district approves an open enrollment application, it is not necessary to reapply for open enrollment to the same school in subsequent years unless the student wishes to change schools or if there has been a break in the student's enrollment at the school. The district shall treat open enrolled students the same as resident students for purposes of continued admission to the school in which the student is open enrolled and admission to the schools into which that school feeds. This includes students who were enrolled in a Scottsdale Unified School District pre-K program the previous school year. Such students shall be automatically open enrolled to the school where they attended pre-K. Your attempts at an ex post facto reversal of this policy are unfair and potentially illegal. Parents and students have relied upon your statements and proceeded accordingly. To potentially expel a student from their pre-K school is patently unfair. Of equal importance is a view from the student's perspective. Pre-K is a time to make friends, learn rules, and become immersed in the educational process. To upset the delicate balance by potentially removing a student to a new school with new friends, new teachers, and a new facility can be terrifying. This is not the case of a mature student moving schools, but a tender 5-year-old. Many studies have explored the effect of school transitions. The transition into kindergarten is the first major school transition. However, for some children who have already attended pre-K at the same location with familiar faces, it will be easier. Transitions to a new school have been shown to relate to a variety of behavioral and psychological changes. Students can experience changed relationships with peers, parents, and teachers. Why should you take this chance? After all, your job is to successfully educate the children and do everything possible to ensure their future success. To pull the proverbial rug out from under the students with a reversal of policy midstream does not accomplish this goal. Every so often, it is imperative we view the educational process through the adage, what is good for the child? In this case, what is good for my client and others similarly situated is to be allowed to stay at Cheyenne, as your policy and website sets forth. Thank you.
Kristin Helmer.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us the chance to speak. I am also the parent of a student at Cheyenne. And the parents of the pre-K students, there's many of us here tonight. We have made the conscious decision to enroll our students at Cheyenne because we believe in the core values of that school and the traditional learning system upon which the school was founded. We've invested financially in this decision, from buying uniforms for our students to paying monthly tuition. We had a choice when it came to which school to enroll our students in for pre-K, whether it be a private preschool or a number of the Scottsdale schools that offer pre-K programs, and we chose Cheyenne. In following the rules set out for open enrollment on the Scottsdale Unified School District's website, the pre-K students at Cheyenne should be considered resident students of the school and automatically enrolled in kindergarten next year. Furthermore, the Cheyenne Traditional School website indicates that current enrolled students do not need reapply. If the board votes to expel the pre-K students out of Cheyenne and force them to go through the open enrollment process with no preference given, each of these 25 4-year-olds will have their routine uprooted and be forced to make the difficult transition to a new school year. This is harmful to their social development and education. The expulsion of 25 pre-K students is insensitive, unfair, disruptive, and baseless, and it would in fact be in direct contradiction to your mission to increase academic achievement and personal growth, and to provide a positive, respectful, and safe learning environment. For the same reason, the open enrollment policy does not make kindergartners re-enroll for first grade, or first graders re-enroll for second grade, and so on, the pre-K students should not have to re-enroll or go through the lottery system for kindergarten. Our students are just as much as part of Cheyenne as any other student on campus, and should, without hesitation, be considered resident students. They wear the same uniforms, they adhere to the same school rules and code of conduct, they have been taught and are learning the Cheyenne way of life, they know the campus, they attend school for the entire day just like every other student, they attend Cheyenne's after-school programs and participate in out-of-school activities related to the school. And in addition, our pre-K students are beginning to learn the Spalding Language Arts and Saxon Mathematics programs, which are essential for their growth. Pre-K parents are equally as committed to this school. We are paying members of the PTO, we volunteer at school fundraisers, and we are involved as room parents. In summary, to put the pre-K students in the open lottery system with everyone else after attending the school for a year goes directly against what your own written policies are. And even worse, it puts their education at risk by forcing them to attend a new school next year. Any decision other than recognizing that the Cheyenne pre-K students are resident students and giving them acceptance into kindergarten for next year is unfair and ultimately detrimental to their learning and future success in school. Thank you very much.
Rodney Theodore.
So I've actually put down what I was going to talk about because I'm also a parent of a Cheyenne pre-K student. And personally, we moved to Scottsdale because of the school district, and we put our child in Cheyenne. Well, let me back up. We wanted to get our child into the Unified School District program as early as possible. So we put her in the Choya Early Learning Campus. That school was closed. We were informed that we should go to Cheyenne because they were starting a pre-K program, and the students would automatically flow into the kindergarten program and then first, second, third grade on. We were well aware of the lottery system, but we were informed and then we were directed to the website that says if you put your child in pre-K, they will immediately flow to the kindergarten and on program. Again, we had choices to put our child anywhere, pay the monthly tuition anywhere, but it's a choice we made. The choice we made to move to Scottsdale, the choice we made to put our child in Cheyenne was because we thought she would have continuity. And it really isn't fair to, put her in one early learning campus, close that campus, move her to another school, and then say you can't continue on with your classmates. Or, like Ms. Helmer pointed out, she's getting to know the campus. She's in the after-school program. She's spending time with older kids. She knows the campus. She's excited to be at Cheyenne. But to uproot her in a lottery process and move her somewhere else really isn't fair at this point, especially after the commitments we've made to the school district, the school, and the 50 other parents or 25 other sets of parents have made to this school. Thank you.
Okay, this is going to be fun. Basil?
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can you help me out with that?
Sure, I can. Yep.
Thank you.
Jasopoulos.
Okay, it was easier than it looked.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Well, my topic is also the pre-K students at Cheyenne, and we were a bunch of the parents. We were actually notified just yesterday in an email that this activity was going on, and we had a bunch of emails back and forth, and quickly put together a petition. Last night, it was sent out, and in less than 24 hours, we were able to get 63% of the parents signing a petition, and I'd like to read that petition to you. Dear Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board, as a parent of a pre-K student, I am petitioning that my child continues their education at Cheyenne. I understand the importance of education, and it has shaped my life, and it has always been one of my life goals to give the best education to my child. To make this goal a reality for my child, I have taken various major steps in my life. Of all the places in the Valley, I chose to purchase a home in Scottsdale because of the reputable school system. Before my child was ready for kindergarten, I actively researched what school would give my child the best education early on. Through this research, I discovered that Cheyenne is starting a pre-K program. As a proactive parent for child education, I signed up my child to the pre-K program. I anticipated that this would secure my pre-K child's education at Cheyenne, since I know it is difficult on a child to uproot from one school to another. To hear that the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board is not planning to include its youngest Cheyenne residents to the 2015-2016 kindergarten school year is extremely disheartening. I am asking you to support your pre-K Cheyenne residents by allowing them to continue their education path at Cheyenne without having to go through the lottery system. And I have here the signatures of all the parents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lisa Campo?
Hi, I'll be brief. I'm here with a quick request also having to do with open enrollment. I have 2 children in the district. We've been here 10 years, and open enrollment was a real gift to our family. We found it necessary to make a change early on, and because of the open enrollment priority system that existed at the time, we were able to stay in the district, and we've had a fabulous experience, and we will continue to until my children graduate. What I'm here to ask, since you have open enrollment on your agenda, I would ask that you would please discuss returning to the former policies governing open enrollment priority. If that could be part of your discussion tonight, I would really appreciate it. I think it helps us retain our students, retain yes votes on override, and retain our tax dollars here. Okay, thank you.
Looking to see. I just wanted to address that on the agenda tonight, the portion of the open enrollment that we were going to talk about has to do with deadlines. So I think that's, let me see, what was posted. And in the meantime, Dante Pittman? Dante Pittman still here? But we'll follow up.
Okay, greetings. My name is Anu Pittman. My father is I. Pittman. We are mathematicians. Work. We would like to meet with the proper people to present certain mathematical knowledge and math. And here's my dad, I. Pittman.
As my son said, we just moved to the district. I'm from Georgia. He's been in Phoenix for about a year. He attends school here. And our thing is that we feel like it's been a suppression of the information that we've been trying to put out. And we've been trying to get certain information into the curriculum. We registered as vendors on the school board district site. And we really were trying to get some information published and into the curriculum, but it seems virtually impossible. So we wanted to know who would we meet with or who would we talk to, and how could we get a venue with you guys in order to present that information.
If you can leave us your email, I'll contact you and we'll set up a meeting.
Okay.
Follow up.
Thank you. That's it.
At this time, we'll have superintendent comments. I'm sorry, can you? Okay, superintendent comments, please.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, and our public. A couple of quick comments that I have. First, I'd like to recognize and thank our Building Services Department. They supported our schools through the storms that occurred. Last weekend, we had over 30 trees down, and our staff was out and about all weekend long and made sure that everything was ready to go on Monday morning, and they did a great job. And they also made sure that all of our buildings were dry. So that was a huge accomplishment in a short amount of time as those storms blew through. And I just want to recognize our building service folks that a lot of times do those things unseen when things happen, and we appreciate that. Next, I'd like to again recognize Mr. Richard Maxwell as the Grammy Music Educator Award. He is one of 25 semifinalists. He's a CMAS teacher at Arcadia High School. And he is in the running for the Grammy Teacher Educator Award, which is an award that is the second year from the Grammys that recognizes outstanding programs in the music field that make a difference for students. We will know in December if he is one of the top 10 finalists, and hopefully from there he will move on to be a finalist and actually get the Grammy Award and be able to go to the Grammy celebration. I'm proud to announce that we have 45 National Merit Commended students in Scottsdale School District for this coming year. I'm also proud to announce that we have 2 students in our district that earned a perfect score on the ACT test. Harrison White, a senior at Saguaro, and Jonito Casalina, a senior at Saguaro High School. Both earned a perfect score on the ACT exam this year. So we're very proud of them. And we have 1 perfect score on the SAT test. That student was Cameron McAllister from Chaparral High School. So 3 of our students have scored perfect scores on the college entrance exams. That speaks volumes for the things that they're doing and for the wonderful teaching and learning that's going on every single day in our classrooms, and we're very proud of that. The Scottsdale Mayor Youth Council, we have 29 Scottsdale students that were selected to participate on the Mayor's Youth Council. The council is comprised of sophomores, juniors, and seniors that either live in or attend school in the city of Scottsdale. The Mayor's Youth Council aims to educate, motivate, and empower Scottsdale youth through experience and leadership, knowledge of local government, experience in group decision-making, and it encourages and supports youth voices with the hope of fostering continued community involvement. So congratulations to our 29 students that will be serving this year on the Mayor's Youth Council from Scottsdale Schools. We have several students that will be attending the Under Armour All-American Bowl. Christian Kirk and Jordan Butler from Saguaro High School and Keenan Walker from Chaparral High School have been selected to play in the Under Armour All-American Bowl on January 2nd at the Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, Florida. It'll be televised live on ESPN, and we want to wish them the best as they finish their football season and then be able to play in an all-star game that will highlight their talents as colleges are truly looking to recruit them and bring them on board. We've got great athletes happening, and we're pretty excited about the opportunity for our 3 athletes that can participate in the Under Armour All-American Bowl. Also, on the sports arena, I'm excited to announce that over the last several weeks, we've had our middle school sports program participate in cross-country. This is the first time we've ever done cross-country for our middle schoolers, and they've gone out on Saturdays and participated in meets across the valley. And it's really a great opportunity for some of those students that have never experienced a long cross-country race to actually do it. And Cliff McKenzie and our middle school coaches have been out there rooting them on, and we congratulate them in that endeavor as we move forward with middle school sports. Our Healthy Packs program, believe it or not, in Scottsdale schools, we have 11 Title I schools and almost 7,000 students that utilize free and reduced lunch. Because child hunger is a reality in every community, backpack food programs help fill the hunger gap that many children experience over weekends and breaks when free and reduced lunch school cafeteria meals are not available. The Healthy Packs program provides bags of kid-friendly, nutritious food to students who have limited access to food on the weekends. Currently, 175 students who attend Arcadia Neighborhood Learning Center and Tonalea Elementary School receive Healthy Packs. We have been very fortunate to be a participant in the Healthy Packs program, and they are asking you to look at their program on their website and consider to be able to support and donate to them so we can continue making sure that we serve all of our students that need to make sure that they have nutritious meals on the weekends. We had 2 teachers from Scottsdale schools that were named the NEA Master Teachers out of a total of 130 teachers from across the United States. Kathy Skinner, who is a teacher, 5th grade teacher and National Board Certified at Redfield Elementary School, and Heather Robinson, a 5th grade teacher and the 2006 Arizona History Teacher of the Year from Desert Canyon Elementary School, are participating in the Master Teachers program. It's done in conjunction with Better Lessons. The Master Teachers overall create lesson plans that are shared across the country with teachers from all walks of education, and we are proud to have 2 of 130 teachers that are from our Scottsdale School District. Finally, I'm excited to announce that the City of Scottsdale has just embarked on a new Fire Department Citizens Academy. And 2 of our administrators, Mr. Daniel Bryan and Dr. Andy Forlis, will be participating in the inaugural Citizens Fire Academy. This program takes place on Wednesdays from October 8th, so tomorrow, through November 12th, and it takes them through all walks of life of the fire department to help them get a better understanding of how our fire department serves our community and ways that they can get involved and educate the rest of our citizens. And we're looking forward to it. This inaugural program will take input to then develop a further program for the City of Scottsdale and its citizens. That concludes my announcements this evening.
Thank you. At this time, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'd like to remove items L and M for brief discussion, please. Oh, I'm sorry, K and L. K and L.
Okay. Can I have a motion to please approve the consent agenda with the exception of items K and L?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's 5-0. Ms. Kirby? would
Thank you. On item K, the ratification of the 2013-14 annual financial report, the consent agenda item itself says that Mr. O'Brien will present the annual financial report, which by definition, being on consent, there is no presentation attached. But the report itself is attached. And I just had one question for Mr. O'Brien, and it's for my education only. And I'm trying to find it, so bear with me. And you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a transfer out of the M&O fund into, I think it's utilities. It's over $2 million.
The water savings. The water savings.
Water savings. If you could just, at a 100,000 foot level, very, very high level, explain to me what's happening with that transfer.
Sure. Madam President, Board Member Kirby, thank you for the question. When we place solar into schools and do energy efficiencies such as improved lighting and other items, one of the items that we do is that to be able to pay for some of those and also at the same time to receive the incentives from the utility company, either APS or SRP, we set up a water and savings fund, and then we move dollars from our M&O to the water savings fund to pay some of the leases and some of the portion that the incentives do not offset. And so we have to make that interfund transfer between funds to be able to pay for it.
So thank you. That's what I assumed was happening. So I went back several years just to try to see what's been happening in this fund. And it looked like early on, and I was on our website and went back as far as I could go with the documents posted on our website. And I don't know if that was the inception of the fund. It may have gone back prior to that. But in the early years, it looked like the fund was neutral in that it was generating enough revenue from leases on its own that we didn't need to do the M&O transfer into it. But then in the past 2 years at least, we've been transferring over $2 million from M&O into that fund. So can you explain that over time what's changed?
Yes, Madam President, Board Member Kirby. It's really kind of the evolving of the process that SUSD has taken. So early on, we were doing small projects, small lease projects, or what they call performance contracts. We put in LED lighting in places, and then over time, over phases, they save certain dollar amounts, and we track that and work through that and make sure that they're doing it. Phase 1 and Phase 2 are going very smoothly. During I believe, Dr. Peterson, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe dating back to 2009, 2010, we got involved with some interest-free bonds through the ARA, the federal ARA program called QSCABs, Qualified School Construction, and we did the very large solar upgrade across of $24 million across 14 sites. And so the loan and the leases have become large when we created that large of a program, and so the transfer became larger.
Let me make it really what really is happening there. Sorry, Danny, but I only know because I was involved when this was set up. The Energy and Water Savings Account was put in by legislation several years back, and that's why there's not a lot of history about it. And what it was done is when the legislature authorized performance contracting, and performance contracting is where we can have upgrades done to our facilities for mechanical systems, electrical, solar, those things, and you pay for them as an offset from utilities. So the reason these dollars go into here is this pays for those solar projects that we had done. So instead of paying APS, we have to pay the solar provider. And so this is how that is done through that Energy and Water Savings Account. So in reality, APS, we would be paying 12 cents a kW. In this reality here, we're paying 7 or 8 cents a kW, so we're saving 4 cents a kW. But so instead of paying APS, we're paying that solar provider, and you have to pay for it through this solar and water savings account.
Thank you.
And then you had a question on the next item as well?
Yes.
Oh, and well, first let's make a motion to approve that agenda item. Ratification of the 2013-14 annual financial report.
So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0. Then the next item. Mrs. Kirby, you had a question?
I'm trying to find it, and I have to scroll through the whole CAFR, so hang on one
Is that the
second.
career ladder?
Yes, if I just, the statement of action. This recommendation says it's recommended the governing board approve the statement of action with respect to career ladder funding for fiscal year 15. And then the background is simply the statement of action taken reflects the 1% funding for fiscal year 15. I just would like that explained publicly.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Over the last several years, the state has phased out career ladder. We started out, it used to be 5.5% of a teacher's pay. It got phased out 0.5%. Now it's phased, the last several years, it's phased out 1% each year. This is the last year of career ladder, and they're only allowing 1%. So what that means is a teacher that does all that extra work is only eligible to get 1% additional pay. Every year we've had to do this statement, and it basically says that we have a career ladder program and we're authorizing that additional 1% pay for those teachers. The sad thing is teachers do a lot of work, and this will be the last year that they will be recognized for that.
Thank you for the explanation. I move to approve item L, approval of statement of action taken with respect to career ladder funding for fiscal year 2015.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. That passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is item 9A, information discussion item, student achievement update.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and our public. Dr. Mitch Von Echten is going to provide an update regarding our student achievement and some of the programs that we've been implementing since last spring and some of the results that we have seen based on that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peterson. Let me find the presentation here. Hold on a moment. Madam President, board members, Dr. Peterson and Sandra, thank you very much for this opportunity to present an update on student achievement relative to minimum 2.0 GPA policy and the math summer bridge programs. In June of 2012, the governing board approved a minimum 2.0 GPA policy with the intent of holding students to a higher threshold for extracurricular eligibility, but also, and perhaps most importantly, to establish a safety net for all students by which struggling students could be identified and provided intervention in order to be successful. Specific to extracurricular eligibility, the SUSD Student Code of Conduct states that if a student has below a 2.0 GPA and participates in AIA-sanctioned athletic and non-athletic activities such as speech and debate, or any other school-sponsored competitive extracurricular activities, the following apply. Students must participate in an intervention and or support programs, and students who are making progress in that intervention or support program are eligible to practice before the next grade check. Additionally, we asked and require frequent grade checks. Currently, it's a minimum of every 4.5 weeks at a mid-quarter and quarter system to determine current GPA. Teachers are asked to update their grades weekly, and this is a collective effort. Administrators, counselors, teachers, coaches, sponsors, and program directors are all responsible in assisting with this grade check. So the graph you see here illustrates a 3-year longitudinal look at the percentage of students in our high schools determined to be ineligible that were either, if you look to the graph for 2013, this area, that is, they had a GPA of below 2.0 with no Fs, or if we look at this graphing area there, that piece of the pie had 1 F, or lastly, 3, the third area, had 2 or more Fs at the first mid-quarter grading period. Again, this is longitudinal, looking at the 3 years through the first quarter that we've had this grading, the 2.0 policy into effect. Prior to 2.0, those students with Fs would have been picked up in a grade check and deemed ineligible. In other words, our system and practices prior to this would have been picked up by our athletic directors and such just by doing scans for Fs. The students below 2.0 with no Fs indicated the additional students indicated or that we identified under the 2.0 policy. So this past year, 1% of these students cropped up and we discovered them because they solely had a GPA below 2.0. Regardless of how these students pan out regarding 2.0 alone, an F, multiple Fs, they all receive intervention. Now, while the percentage breakdown among high schools with a GPA below 2.0 or earning an F or multiple Fs has remained relatively unchanged at the first mid-quarter grading period, when looking at the total numbers of students, note that in high schools, there was an increase in the total number of students impacted year over year from the fall of 12 to the fall of 13. We went from 2362 total to 2515. But there has been a decrease year over year, fall of 13 to this fall of 14, from 2515 to 2284. I think that what we could probably attribute to this too was our new grading policies that went into effect last fall, and we did have a bit of a dip at that first quarter mark regarding those grades. This graph illustrates the same 3-year longitudinal look at the percentage of students, but in our middle schools. Again, we have below 2.0 with no Fs, had 1 F, or lastly, those students that had 3 or more Fs. Again, relatively consistent year over year. But when we look at the data here, the percentage breakdown among middle school students with a GPA below 2.0 or earning an F is a bit of a different story. When looking at the total number of students, note that in the middle schools, there was an increase in the total number of students impacted year over year from fall of 12 to fall of 13, from 874 to 1,074. And there was an increase of the total numbers of students impacted year over year, 13 to 14. 1,074 to 1,251. Again, I think that initial year, looking at last year, this again could have been attributed possibly to the impact of grading changes in our policies there. And when we look at this most recent increase, that's a conversation I'm having with our middle school principals at that time, why we're seeing that increase. So as previously stated, all of the students identified with the grade checks are to receive intervention. Many times it's as simple as reminding a student to turn in an assignment or make it up an exam, and they have it. They're back and they're eligible. Schools offer established interventions such as tutoring at lunch or before and after school, math labs to help support the students. But I think most recently, additionally, we have also established broader district-supported interventions such as math support courses, the math bridging that I will speak to in just a moment, that schools can tailor to their unique needs. Lastly, and although probably not an intervention per se, I do believe that the opportunities for redos and retakes allow students to improve grades while at the same time striving for mastery learning. So lastly, what are some of the takeaways we have regarding the 2.0 policy? Well, intervention is unique to each school and varies by each school. Students that are ineligible for extracurricular activities take the most advantage of provided interventions. So our athletes, our fine arts participants, the speech and debate, if they're ineligible, they get on it, they get the job done. Students who are not connected to the school community are the vast majority of students identified in need of support. And this was the big aha we presented 2 years ago, in fact, and Dr. Thomas noted that, in fact, of the students that are deemed ineligible, roughly it was about 85% are disconnected to the school. They're not involved in anything extracurricular. And that the case hasn't changed this last fall, nor even this fall in running these numbers. Unless an identified student participates in athletics, identifying and tracking students in other competitive activities can be a little bit labor intensive. Our ADs and their support personnel do a wonderful job of pulling the Fs and the 2.0 GPA, matching that report to their current list of athletes that are in season, and then trying to call those various other activities such as the drama event coming up, the band trip that's coming up, the speech and debate. So it takes a little bit of work, but they are getting it done and working with these students and holding them accountable. Okay, topic number 2, the math bridging program. This past summer, each of our 5 high schools offered a summer bridge program. The essential purposes of the bridging programs were 1, close our learning gaps, 2, build teacher-student relationships, and 3, enculturate students to their high school setting. Participation among the high schools included a total of 179 students district-wide, 160 students completing, that is, they attended and they were there for all of the session. 146 students received credit. Not all of our programs were credit bearing, and I'm going to be an example of one from Saguaro High School in just a moment. 17 teachers participated and presented these programs to our students, and there was a total of 11 classes between the 2 summer sessions. So I wanted to take this opportunity and provide you a specific example. This one is from, this is the Algebra Bridge from Saguaro High School. And essentially students were identified by their middle school, and that was either using AIM scores or benchmark scores testing, that were in need of basic math skills, and those that would need assistance meeting the objectives of first semester algebra. Instructional materials were developed by our teachers specifically for this course, modifying currently adopted materials. And the Algebra Bridge course was taught during both sessions of the summer school for 4 hours a day and included different students during each session. I included a quote here. This one's from a parent. "I've seen an amazing improvement with her confidence," that is her daughter, her student. "Every day she would come home and tell me how well she was doing on her tests." But I wanted to expand upon the Algebra Bridge and also include something that was very unique to Saguaro, and that was a Geo-Trig Honors Summer Bridge program. This was non-credit bearing, and this was the one I had alluded to before. The course was designed to support students that completed Algebra 1 as an 8th grader, but needed assistance taking Geo-Trig Honors as a 9th grader. Students participated in a series of lessons. There was 16 in total that introduced them to Geo-Trig Honors class at Saguaro High School. Additionally, students received basic training on using a graphing calculator and were introduced to key concepts pertaining to geometry. Excuse me. The Geo-Trig Honors course was taught 4 days in the second summer session for 4 hours a day. And again, this is a very good quote. This one's from a student that participated. "I wanted to be sure I was prepared, and after taking the classes, I felt ready and confident. As an incoming 9th grader, it was nice to be able to get comfortable with the campus and meet a teacher who I love and now have as my teacher." And I love that quote because it hits upon all 3 of those goals: building relationships, closing learning gaps, and enculturating to that new school. So last May when I presented the Summer Bridge program to you, I also showed you some indicators of success, and I chose 3 of those to just remind you. The things we will look to evaluate the Summer Bridge program as we go forward and continue to collect data on how these students are doing as freshmen. 1, all students master Algebra 1 standards by the end of the 9th grade. Specifically, when you said mastery, I said that we would look for the percent of students earning a C or better. Increase in math credits earned towards graduation. For clarification, last May I said the better way of maybe looking at this is, are we seeing a reduction in Algebra 1 credit recovery? And then lastly, we would hope to increase our grade level percent passing aims, or whatever our adopted test will be shortly, versus peer level districts. Moving forward with the math bridging program, we utilize DSEG dollars to fund this program and to ensure a return on investment. We will certainly make sure that we effectively staff our programs and monitor costs so we can build future capacity. We would like to better drill down and be specific to individual student learning gaps so we can really hone in and take advantage of what these students need. And amazingly, we've heard from some of our teachers that we would like to see this possibly expanded to the areas of reading and writing. I want to thank our teachers, our counselors, our assistant principals, and directors for their efforts in meeting the needs of our students. It truly was a collective effort, and with that, I will take any questions you might have.
Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. So back to the pie charts, and let's just use high school for discussion purposes. I know that one of the commonalities that we found among these students, and we've known it, as you said, for a couple of years, is that they're not connected to the school. Mm-hmm. But are there any other trends that we see in analyzing the profile of these students? And by that, I mean, are they certain grade levels, certain high schools, certain subjects? That we, in your last bullet of focusing on reading and writing makes me wonder if some of these Fs are in the areas of English language arts, or so I'm asking the question.
I think that would be accurate. I think what you would find is this is not common or unique to any one of our schools. You would see students with multiple Fs in all 5 of our high schools, unfortunately. And I would say that those Fs typically come into the core academic areas. So you would probably see English language arts in there, a science, maybe even a social studies of probably the 3 or 4 main areas where our students need some additional help. I think if you looked at it grade level, it tends to be a freshman transition, I don't want to say issue, but it tends to be more prevalent at the freshman level. Let's just look at it that way. You'll see it drop off dramatically by that junior and certainly by the senior year where you're seeing that.
Okay, so are we considering any other actions to try to tackle this beyond what's been presented tonight? Anything else we're talking about and how to really get at this?
Well, I think
the numbers are somewhat, I mean, they haven't changed dramatically. If you'll go back to the number slide.
The totals?
Yeah.
No.
They're somewhat stagnant. I mean, they're doing a little bit of this.
And if you looked at the total as a percentage of our enrollment, it's a roughly around 25, 26% year over year over year of these students that need that kind of help. And a lot of this is really some of the social and behavioral help our students need, and tackling from that side and working from a student services side. A lot of these students that struggle often need some help in areas besides the school. It's at home, it's in other areas. So when we can have some of our agencies that can assist us and help us on that front, it's very, very beneficial. When we see students with multiple Fs in a grades, typically we will work administrations with their guidance department very, very closely. And I think that's the kind of support that many of these kids need. It's not just about identifying with the school, it's often also identifying at home and getting the resources that those students and families need in terms of building some of those skill sets to cope with these things. I liked that we had, for instance, at Chaparral, the freshman boot camp over the summer, and these kind of freshman transition programs is something that I would support and like to see our principals move forward with to try to also help that freshman level and that transition. A lot of that is attributed to the acculturation part of it.
That's good. Did the district supported those boot camps financially, correct, as opposed to the site? Was it site funds?
That was site. Mm-hmm.
Site funds had to pay for that?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Boot camp?
No, we use DSEG dollars for those summer math.
No,
bridge.
well, two different questions here. Summer
Yes,
math,
boot
the bridging
camp.
program, DSEG dollars. The example I gave you of SHAP's boot camp, when
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this at our first board meeting, about half the freshman class was there. That was
Right.
supported by Chaparral, site dollars.
Site dollars.
Mhm.
And were they the only high school that did that?
Well, that particular one, the boot camp idea, I thought was rather novel, and that was them. But no, I would say that all of our high schools have some kind of a freshman transition. Sometimes that's a day, sometimes it's several days.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Perleberg?
Thank you, Dr. Von Echten. It's an excellent presentation and a good view of the challenges that so many of our students have at our sites. And I love what we've done, especially over the summer in the bridging programs. And I love how we're just really focusing in on this. One of the questions, I think it's more of a follow-up of the changes that have been made in really focusing in on these kids, understanding where they are, where their gaps are, and helping them in once they are there. I still wonder how far along we are in finding that right classroom setting, that right meaningful differentiation for them while they're sitting in that class during the school year. I know all the extra things, you know, the interventions and all of that is wonderful. I'm just wondering where we are in the classroom itself during that class.
Well, I think that I can speak to going forward when we look at, for instance, math, identifying some of those needs earlier in terms of some of the real basic arithmetic kind of help some of our students need, and addressing earlier at the 7th and 8th grade level. That kind of learning with it's not math support at the middle school level, but the math support class that they have. Let's just leave it at that. And then again, picking those pieces up in the summer, I'm still a firm believer that we can differentiate within that classroom and address the needs of those students in an algebra, with that goal being that all of our freshmen successfully pass algebra by the end of that freshman year. So that's a continuing conversation and working with our teachers to address those needs, but I do think that we're heading it off at the pass at an earlier grade level at the middle schools in terms of identifying those specific gaps that our kids have at those lower learning levels, so to speak.
Mitch, could you share what Arcadia is doing with the math students with the extra class?
Well, they've done quite a bit of work at Arcadia in terms of being able to provide support with those students. They've got far lower numbers, and in fact, they have also doubled up in terms of the staff members within that class, so that there's really a lot of support in terms of individualized learning for those kids. I'm not sure if that was what you were alluding to, Dr. Peterson, but they've kind of expanded that math support in that they really have lowered those class sizes and numbers relative to those kids that need that additional support. And they're drilling down and focusing upon the specific areas that kids have the gaps and trying to attack those individually with very targeted intervention.
That's terrific. Thank you very much for this presentation.
Mr. Brown?
I was just curious if there was your gut on the sixth grade moving to middle school, and you know, in my mind, that articulation, getting that young person in that middle school arena earlier should help. But what's your feeling on that?
I think it's been a great thing. When we talk about enculturation to a school, I think that we've now passed that phase of middle school being a 2-year passing phase, and our kids now, sure, 5th to 6th grade is a transition, no different than 8th grade to 9th. It's a big new world at that middle school, but I like the fact that those kids are there on that campus for 3 years. I think we have a greater opportunity with those teachers and the leadership at a middle school level to really develop those kids going into the high school.
Would we anticipate, well, we would hope then that our freshmen come off a little bit better or have it a little easier than they do right now by the time our 6th graders get to a...
Well, I don't know if they'll have it any easier, but I think we'll prepare them better.
Prepare them better. There you go. Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Jackson?
Mitch, thank you. Great presentation. I guess I'm not an educator, so I always feel like I'm wading in an area that I shouldn't be. But I wanted to dovetail on what Mrs. Kirby said. The numbers don't seem to be making drastic changes, and again, I'm speaking as a layman. I know there's a tremendous amount of intervention coming along. Is it possible, Mitch, that it's too early, that we have not enough years of, that possibly these intervention programs that we are implementing need more time, or is this big progress? Am I just, I'm looking at the pie charts for the high schools, and it's not a knock by any means. I understand these are challenging, very difficult things to accomplish. This is by no means a criticism. It is, I just wanted to see if maybe we need more time.
I think we need to be a little careful with this data, and that this is a snapshot 23 days into the school year. And so we're capturing grades of where these kids are at. And I don't think we fully have had the opportunities for our teachers to work their magic with these kids and explore the curriculum to any, considerable depth after 23 days. Regardless, I think if we were to look at this again at the quarter and semester, it begins to, I would hope, to tell a different picture. Regardless, the whole idea of this was early intervention. Capture these kids. 23 days is soon enough, and if we can start making a difference, let's make that difference. But, I think little takeaways here when you look at the high school level, the fact that we have fewer kids earning the multiple Fs, perhaps that's some progress. We're down year over year. I would like to think that's a gain, but again, then you look at that middle school level and you've got an increase year over year in each of those areas. And I don't know, Mr. Brown, perhaps that pertains to our 6th graders coming in. I think it's early, and we need to just continue to work with that intervention, continue to refine that intervention, but most importantly, really drill down and provide the targeted areas that the kids need.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Mitch. Could any of the increases at the middle school have to do with increased rigor and higher standards, that in being in the middle of going from one set of standards to another, and those kids not having the benefit of an extra year or so to catch up?
Well, funny you would ask that, because I had considered going there tonight. I want to be careful in using rigor and implying that just because we see that the focus upon rigor is resulting in lower grades. Rigor is really about opportunity instructionally to expose our kids and think at higher levels. That doesn't necessarily have to equate that kids are not doing as well. Regardless, I think perhaps part of this is all eyes have been on middle school for a couple years, and there's a lot of effort to hold our kids accountable and push our kids. And so there could be some of that in terms of what we see in terms of the grades. But I think as we continue that dialogue with our building leaders and our teachers as to what is rigor, what do we want to see with rigor, as we continue with our refined grading practices, I think we'll see some changes here, though.
And I guess I'm not saying the good thing or bad thing. It's more of that cohort having gone through, being the particular ones that are going through the change in standards, rather than, I guess I really wasn't talking about the rigor part of it on a scale, but just going from one set of standards to another, that particular cohort seems to be affected.
I think that's a possibility. I'm not completely sure I understand which cohort you're identifying, middle school kids per se, or our sixth graders that transitioned to last year and moving through.
And I'm thinking of the elementary, because when we realigned our standards so that they would be college and career ready.
Correct.
At the high school level to make sure that we were there. I'm just wondering if there were if there was any cohort of students that may have gotten kind of crunched in the changes.
I'm
not saying particular. I'm just saying that
I think
this
in
could pull
changing
out.
and the standards and adjusting to the Common Core, I think there was all of our grade levels were probably challenged for a short time,
Okay.
but I think we've moved beyond that. The conversations in Scottsdale regarding Common Core and the how we have worked with our teachers in terms of making that transitions, I'm confident that we're seeing that take place in the classroom. I don't know that that's having an impact here.
I wanted to make that clear. The other thing, well, the one thing that I really want to make clear is that those pie charts are talking about just the students that are ineligible. I
Correct.
don't want anybody to think that that's representation of all of our
No,
schools.
that's just a small sliver of all of our students.
And for the bridge, the math bridge support, how were those students identified? Was it strictly on the 2.0 standards?
No, not at all. It was out of our middle schools. Frankly, our ed services people, our ed services assistant principals from each of the high schools worked with their counterpart at the middle school. Those students were identified, I think, really kind of on three major ways. We looked at Ames scores, well, several different ways. Ames, benchmark testing, grades, teacher recommendation. And so there was a lot of conversation, but it was the middle school folks that identified those students. Several of our ed services assistant principals, though, went down to the middle schools, met with these not only the teachers but the students in terms of identifying those that would benefit from that.
And was participation in the Math Bridges program voluntary or?
Yes.
Okay.
Recommended.
Recommended. And what percentage of our students declined to participate that were recommended? Do you know that?
You know, I don't have that number, but I could certainly find that for you.
Okay. Thank you. Mrs. Kirby?
Thank you. I'm very appreciative that you didn't use this as an excuse, but I do think it is resulting in us with some very solid attack plans on this, and we're swimming upstream a little bit with our class sizes. And, you know, we have increased our class sizes in this exact same time frame, and that does make it more difficult. We don't have as many adults to meet the needs of those kids that you talked about earlier that do really need that adult connection. And so while I appreciate that you didn't go there tonight, I do think it needs to be said.
I think
So-
that's fair.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
If there's no more discussion, the next item on the agenda is information discussion item 9B, historical overview of Arizona education funding.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As our CFO, Dan O'Brien, comes up to present this presentation, I just would like to clarify, we still have a few of the parents from Cheyenne that were here from public comment, to let them know that I'm not sure where the misinformation came from, but in accordance with our policy, those pre-K students do roll up and stay at that school. So I'm not sure where that happened, but that information is not correct. And I did verify that with our open enrollment folks just a few minutes ago to make sure that that is the case. So we will make sure that we reach out to all 25 of those families to let them know that.
Okay. Madam President, board members, Dr. Peterson, Sandra. This evening I'm going to present a quick overview of the legislative budget reductions from 2008-2009 budget year to the present that affected Scottsdale Unified School District. Just a little bit of background as we always talk about it. The base support level is the dollars that the state gives us for our M&O budget based off of our average daily membership. So we talk a lot about base level amount, and it's the dollars that we get per one ADM of membership. Prop 301, also known as Classroom Site Fund, was passed by voters in November of 2000. A few of these requirements were that in the first 5 years, the state legislature was required to increase this base level support level by 2% every year. And then from 2006 forward until the end of the law, that the legislature is required to increase the base support level by the lesser of 2% or the price deflector. And so basically after that year it would adjust to whatever the lesser was, 2%. And we'll see a little bit of historical and talk about that here. This is some of the history. You can see in the first couple of years the price deflector was above 2. So again, we got the lesser, so we got the 2%. You can see in some other years, it was a little bit different. So this gives kind of the brief beginning of the price inflator. After this, obviously, we had some of the economic downturn, and so some changes were made. This right here is following the remainder years after those first few years. As you can see here in 2007, 2008, was really the final year of the inflation. We did get the inflation in 2008, 2009, but as we'll see in just a minute, because of the economic downturn there in January of 2009, the legislature made an adjustment to our base support level in a mid-year cut. You can see those many years that we did not get the inflation, and then the previous two, this year and the previous year, 2013, 2014, we received the inflation again after the lawsuit that was brought by schools on the legislature, and the Arizona Supreme Court agreed that the legislature was not following the law. I also placed in here what the inflation factor would be, so we can see the differences on how it would have rolled forward. So a little bit about 2008, 2009, as I spoke. We did start the year off by getting the inflation, and then obviously we had the economic downturn or the recession. And so in January of 2009, the legislation was Senate Bill 1006, implemented a mid-year cut, and that cut statewide for K-12 was $133 million. And now here we'll just go through a few years and kind of talk a little bit and show what these reductions have been. Again, as we spoke just a moment ago, 2008, 2009 had some funding reductions of $133 million. As you can see there, ours was about $5.7 million, a little more than 5.7. Where we got cut is we did get cut in our M&O budget. We got cut in our soft capital, or what we call 625 funds. And these are capital dollars, furniture, fixture, and equipment dollars that were used for strictly classroom and site purposes. So soft capital was used for classroom purposes, not administrative purposes. And then building renewal. Building renewal is the fund that was put in place in the late 90s by another lawsuit to the legislature, and created Students First, which was the requirement for the state of Arizona to provide not only construction building and minimum adequacies for schools, but also preventative maintenance and dollars to repair and maintain our buildings. Sorry about that, a little bit of a raspy voice today. In 2009, 2010 is where we started a lot of our reductions. Career ladder, as we spoke many times and we've talked during our budget presentations, career ladder was deemed unconstitutional by the Arizona Supreme Court. The legislature then enacted statutes that allowed us to, instead of just get rid of the funding altogether, we kind of phase it out, and we've talked about that during our budget processes for many years now. Elimination of excess utilities. Excess utilities has been in place for many years, a couple decades. It is a formula that is used by the state that during the late 80s and early 90s, when utility costs were growing exponentially, to create a base year, which was in the late 80s, and based off costs from the previous year, give us additional dollars to help pay for those cost increases. The legislature eliminated this funding, and SUSD's portion of this funding was a little over $5.3 million. And in 2009, 2010 was the first year of the elimination of these fundings. Desegregation, frozen fundings. Desegregation is dollars that we receive based off of an agreement with the federal government to provide funding for students. During obviously the growth years of the early 2000s, the legislature saw desegregation as gaining more dollars out of the general fund. And so in 2009, 2010, they put a freeze on it, saying that you don't, even if you grow or get more ADM, you don't get more desegregation dollars. It's frozen at the current levels because it is a portion of funding based off ADM. And we also had a significant cut to soft capital, 80% cut to soft capital. Again, soft capital were dollars that were used inside the classroom for capital purposes. And then we had building renewal. Again, building renewal being part of the Students First or the SFB dollars. For fiscal year 2010, this total dollar amount was a little over $12 million. 2010, 2011, again, continued the reduction of career ladder. And then continued the elimination of excess utilities. So again, prior year, 2009, 2010, the legislature got rid of excess utilities and continued to have that reduction in 2010, 2011, $5.3 million. We had desegregation frozen. Again, we had that cap year, so that cap year way back from 2008, 2009. And then we lost all-day kindergarten funding. So in the early 2000s, I don't know exactly which year, the legislature, along with the governor, actually through the governor, put in place to pay for all-day kindergarten. We had that for several years, and then during the economic downturn, they took that away and revoked it, so we no longer get the weight B count for a little over $4 million. We continued with the soft capital reduction again, and this is going again. Soft capital is we still have the budget capacity, the budget there, and the state gives it to us in our formula, but then they reduce it down and keep those monies in the general fund. And then building renewal. 2011, 2012, we had the phase down of the career ladder. Again, excess utilities, desegregation, all-day kindergarten. And then in 2011, 2012, not only did they reduce our soft capital, they also then went to our other capital fund, which was our unrestricted capital fund, which is dollars that are used in the classroom and then for administration. It's also used for textbooks, instructional aids, for a reduction of $2 million. And remembering then that in that unrestricted capital, that's where we have use some of that money for textbooks and instructional aids. So during some of these reductions, it was very important that we had that capital override, because that capital override is what helped continue us to allow us to buy and purchase instructional aids in the classroom and our textbooks and our curriculum adoptions. So we are very fortunate to have that over the past years. 2012, 2013, again, pretty much the same. Obviously, we had a little bit more in the career ladder because we had that continued 1% every year phase down of it. Continued the elimination of excess utilities, and then the full-day kindergarten, soft capital, unrestricted capital, and building renewal. In the 2012, 2013 legislative year, The legislature did start a program of building renewal, what they call emergency grants, funded. Every year it changes a little bit. It ranges between $15 and $20 million. We then have to apply for them and try to get them. I know I just saw a figure from today's school facilities board that in this fiscal year, $11 million is all that's remaining. So approximately $6 to $7 million has already been used by schools across the state. So it's definitely not adequate funding, as they have a lot of requests that come in and continue to come in over the years. 2012, 2013, 2014, again, the increase in the career ladder reduction, excess utilities frozen, but then this is the first year of the maintenance and operations override phase down. So we had the first third phase down in this year. You can see it, the $4.3 million. This was also, if we remember back in the budget cycle, this is the year that they eliminated the soft capital fund, move those allocations up into unrestricted capital, and then to what I would suspect align slightly more with what charter schools get, since they get what's called additional assistance. They changed the name of unrestricted capital to district additional assistance, so it sounds like we're getting the same amount as the charter schools, although I will tell you we do not get the same allocation as charter schools, but the title is very similar to it. We got elimination of that. That combined the unrestricted and soft capital, again, is in the range of 60 to 65%. I say range only because it is not a true percentage that they cut from our allocation. They have a set amount for the whole entire state, and then the state allocates it out to the districts based off of the amount of money that they get every year in the budget. This is the current fiscal year, so 2014, 2015. We're getting the last amount of our career ladder. This will be the last year of the career ladder. So you see that it gets a little bit larger. We have the excess desegregation, and then the M&O override, you see that jumped up also. This is, again, with M&Os, M&O overrides, they're good for 7 years. In year 6 and 7, if they are not renewed, a third comes off in the second year, which would be this year. We'd have the next phase, or the two-thirds phase. And then obviously next year, if it is not renewed, we have the final phase. So again, those are dollars that increased. Continue have the district additional assistance. We put a little bit of an asterisk by that, because as I stated a little bit earlier, that is a set dollar amount. And so until everybody does their budgets and we get the AFRs in and know some items, the state does not release what that allocation is. So that allocation should be released here shortly, and we'll have our final amount hopefully by our December revision. And then we have, again, the building renewal, and I spoke a little bit about that earlier. So you can see that with the increase of career ladder going away, with the phase out of M&O, with some of the other items that have been continuously not funded by the legislature, that this year for the Scottsdale budget, we had to eliminate or reduce over $32 million. Just quickly, so we can all see it in one chart. This is just a summary of the funding. You can see it started in 2008, 2009, as I spoke here, with a mid-year cut, and then just continued to get larger and larger throughout the years as more things were either reduced or eliminated. And then that's my presentation. I'll be more than happy to take any questions.
Questions, comments? Mr. Jackson?
Danny, thank you. What a sobering presentation. Anyway, I've seen it all black and white like that over the years. That I keep seeing these figures. I'm even stunned at the dollar amounts that we've been reduced. So I don't have a comment. This is a sad presentation. That's all I got to say. And I guess one more. The only comment I have is the fact that this district is performing so well in spite of these numbers is once again a testament to incredible teachers, principals, administrators. We have an unbelievable job by the fine folks here. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
I guess this is just a comment to the folks that say live within your budget. Well, when your budget changes every single year by millions and millions of dollars, it makes it a little tough. But to what Mr. Jackson said, it's a tribute to all you folks doing a wonderful job teaching our children in spite of the funding. Thank you all.
Thank you for the presentation, Danny. It's, as Mr. Jackson said, to see that all it put together into one place, it's no wonder that we feel like we all have bumps and bruises. And it's very sobering, very sobering. I just want to commend everybody that has been able to maintain the level of quality with everything that we've had to do. And thank you very much for everybody pitching in and trying to help through these tough times. We know that there are businesses and individuals that have had a difficult time through this too. And I'm hearing a lot of good things, and I'm hearing a lot of compliments to our schools, to our staff, to our administration and this is very, very sobering. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. I'll try to have a little bit of a happier one next time if I can.
Wouldn't that be nice? If there's no more comments, the next item on the agenda is item 10A, but I would like to table that. I'd like to make a motion to table that pending more information. Just table that. Then the next item would be item 10B, Governing Board Policy JFB, Open Enrollment Timeline Changes.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Michelle Marshall is going to present just the changes for the timeline. And our high school principals are here to answer any questions, because this is an issue that really brought to the surface this past week in meeting with our high school principals, and what we need to do to try to get staffing and student numbers identified as quickly and early as possible to help them do their high school work that they need to do every spring. So, Michelle?
Madam President, members of the board, we have for you tonight, for your consideration, an action item regarding our policy JFB open enrollment. As we discussed during a previous public meeting, we are having ongoing conversations with our principals about the substance of this policy, but as part of those discussions, in particular with our high school principals, as Dr. Peterson mentioned, it came to our attention that they would really like us to bring to you as soon as possible these requested changes to our timelines to move them up to assist them with staffing and scheduling issues that they've run into in the past. And so what I have up here is exactly just our action item itself, because we summarized what the timeline requested changes are. You also have a red line version of the policy itself. The first deadline that we would like to move up by a month is for the district to get our packets out to families. So we put that on our website and have the information available as of November 1 instead of December 1. You'll also see as part of this action item that we are recommending that you waive your usual second read of these changes due to the fact that that first deadline is November 1, and our next meeting will be after that date. The next requested change is that we would move the deadline for enrollment applications from January 15 back to December 15, so before the winter break. Following that, the district would notify families of acceptance decisions 2 weeks earlier than normal, by February 1 instead of February 15th. And then enrollment documents due back from families. Our policy currently says for all grade levels that those are due on March 31st. We are requesting that we change that so that elementary school remains at March 31st, middle schools, including K-8s, to March 15th, and high schools to February 21st. That date is important, especially for high schools, as I understand it, and Sean or Pam will correct me if I'm wrong. The sites have to get their staffing levels into HR by March 5th or 6th? 5th? And so that moving that date back for them is really important to help them try to target, what their FTE looks like for the coming year. The other two items that we've summarized here are just that for those people who get notified after March 31st, rather than a 2-week window, we would ask them to return their documents within a 1-week window. And then currently, we have open enrollment closed for all grade levels at March 14th. We would request to change that to high school only, closing on March 14th. And with that, I'll take any questions, and certainly if our high school, or if any of our principals want to.
Any discussion, questions? Mrs. Perleberg?
Okay, thank you. Since this is kind of all new to us a little bit tonight, we haven't discussed this prior. I'm just trying to understand the rationales. Moving that up to November 1, I think I understand why the goal is to do that. I have requested, and Dr. Peterson knows this, I've requested that whatever our principals who are available to come tonight, since this is a request that's really coming from them, I'd love to hear from them and understand the rationales and what they're dealing with as they look at these dates and what will truly be helpful and what's important. So
Great, I'll invite them up.
Governing Board President, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Peterson, Sandra, good evening. Brian Court, Principal, Saguaro High School.
Nathan Slater, Principal at Arcadia High School.
Good evening, Alyssa Tarkington, Principal, Coronado High School.
How may we assist?
Just tell us what you think. How about that? Let's start with the November 1. What's going to be our benefits for November 1?
A number of benefits, and if I may provide from a site perspective an overview, this has been an annual conversation regarding a number of timelines that are associated with optimal scheduling and operation of, I'll just speak to high schools at this point, optimal operation and scheduling of high schools while meeting the needs of students the best we can within timelines. The timelines included, with regard to the November 1st, are also inclusive of other timelines that I know Dr. Sitton and Dr. Holmes right now are working on with our transfer committee that have to do with staffing and personnel. With regard to open enrollment timelines, again, this annual conversation has been important to high school principals from the perspective that moving these earlier in the school year ultimately allow us to contact families who have been accepted under open enrollment, invite those families in, and visit with the students and families in a timeline that corresponds with our student course selection for all current and feeder program students. That results in the high school's ability to identify on a parallel timeline which students are choosing what courses, which allows the high school administrators to allocate X amount of staffing more appropriately to service the requests of students, which allows high school principals to more effectively communicate back with human resources that allocation of staffing per department and subsequently the assignment of those staffing contracts to the personnel, which I suspect would allow human resources to move on that information, if need be, to post vacancies, unassign continuing personnel, or reassign through the teacher transfer process. This process and adjustment in timelines of the staff allocation, the response and teacher transfer that's being discussed, and the inclusion of this modification suggestion of open enrollment timeline is very powerful for us to be more effective and efficient in what we do. And this, again, has been an ongoing conversation. In a meeting Thursday with the high school principals, it was my understanding all the high school principals support an adjustment in this timeline.
So all the high school principals support this timeline, all the dates?
The dates are a fantastic improvement to allow us to get our jobs done more effectively. Personally, I'd like to see the February 21st go to February 15th, and I'd be happy to describe why.
The two of you agree with that? And care to explain why as well?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to elaborate a little bit. In order for the timeline, in my opinion, the most important piece of a high school is the staffing and the allocation of budgeting based on the financial situation that we just saw Mr. O'Brien very soberingly describe to all of us. Class sizes are large. If the timelines aren't adjusted, what happens is, as an ed services assistant principal and as a principal, we are required to get the staffing to HR prior to knowing the number of students that we've accepted via open enrollment. So I'll give you an example at Arcadia. At Arcadia High School, if we have 100 open enrollment students that we don't know about, I'm just using round numbers, prior to getting that information to HR, and those 100 students each take 6 classes, that's 600 sections divided by 36 is about 18 FTE, 18 full teachers that we have to guess. And we can guess pretty well based on the level that they are. Freshmen, they're going to take English 1, they're going to take Algebra 1. But it's not an effective fiscal model, in my opinion, because the timelines don't line up the way that they should. We should have the information from OE, the Central Enrollment Office, prior to having to make decisions that impact staffing in a fiscal timeline that we're in now. So the important one, in my view, is the 21st, and the other ones, the November 1st, the 15th, and the February 1st, really just correspond to what they were before. We're going to have documents ready a month early. We're going to have a deadline a month early, and then we'll be able to get information from CEO to make sure that our staffing decisions on people are accurate based on the information that we must have at some point anyway. So in my opinion, from Arcadia's perspective, what Mr. Court said is 100% accurate, and so I just wanted to elaborate with some numbers. I'm a numbers guy. What the impact is if we had 100 kids, which we have more at Arcadia.
Thank you. I too agree. Most of the dates just correlate to prior date policies. It's about that February 21st or even earlier. I'm less of a numbers person, but I'll talk programmatically. When you don't not only have the numbers for open enrollment, but you've not spent time with the families for the course requests and those first elective choices. When you have numbers, you know the basics, and that really just depends on the cohort as well. So again, they all have to take English for 4 years, math, science, 3 years, etc. But when you get into the elective courses, which are just as important, they're actually the largest category in the graduation requirement, we are impacted. And so you can have some anticipation with numbers, but you cannot predict why families are choosing our schools and the unique programs that we all have. And so again, staffing is impacted. You're talking about assignments. You're talking about the morale with teachers and not knowing from year to year if I'm going to be at this school or that school. I can make some predictions based on my staffing criteria sheet, when we could have much more accurate information when we're submitting, again, our staffing allocations or requests based on hard numbers of assignments to HR. So I also look at it as a programmatic standpoint on each of our campuses.
Thank you very much for your explanations. It's very enlightening. Mrs. Kirby?
Person, so I actually really understood you, Nathan. I was with you all the way, and I appreciate your efforts to not only address the morale, but to be fiscally responsible as well, and I commend you for doing that and for having this conversation. So I'm trying real hard to keep up. One question that I wanted to clarify with you is the enrollment documents currently due March 31st, and the proposals February 21. Explain to me what that means, enrollment documents due.
Yes. With regard to enrollment, that timeline would move for the high schools from March 31st to February 21st. And it's my understanding the enrollment documents due indicate families who are accepted for open enrollment to a school would need to approach centralized enrollment with documents necessary to be activated in our SUSD enrollment system. Once that process would occur, centralized enrollment would notify the family you are activated in Synergy and cleared to meet with the personnel at the school. We too at the school, around that timeline, would you like to address this?
Great.
Thank you.
Keep going.
We at the school at that time would be notified, here is a family or 20 or 50 families who are now activated. And that's when we take off with the magical side, as I like to do it, and it's no secret, I think, organizationally, appropriate student placement is a particular passion of mine with regard to this timeline and extended associated policies and timelines that I'm anxious to speak about internally as well. So once a student is activated through centralized enrollment, the school's notified, the school invites the family in at the high school level to sit with a counselor, at which time, if there's any documents, educational documents, deficient, meaning if a family does not happen to have an active transcript with them, or report cards that help us in counseling to best place students appropriately with course selections, at that time, a records request would be generated at the site, and a parent would sign that records request. School personnel then would fax that over to the sending school or the student's previous school to ascertain educational documents that would help us make decisions as to credits earned, credits needed, and the categories for those to help students be successful. Once that occurs and we're able to get those documents, then that student's able to make appropriate course selections with the guidance of their family, working with the guidance counselor at the high school. And once that data is input to the Synergy system, then the administrator is able to take that data and create the numbers of needed sections based on student enrollments. This may be extended to the documents due, but it's all interconnected.
So does everything you just described happen before, in today's world, before March 31st or after March 31st?
In today's world of last spring and the previous springs, those interactions would happen after all the classes are created.
Well, that was my
Yes.
follow-up question, is when are your staffing numbers due to HR?
Under the current timeline, far before we are notified and able to visit with students, which is why this is so exciting for us at the sites.
I can imagine. I commend you for doing as well as you've done. So
Pretty
this
good
is
guesstimators based on trend data. Now, historically, the unfortunate limitation to families who've been accepted and enrolled under open enrollment, many times because our sections are created and staffing has been allocated, students may be seated with the counselor and say, I know you're interested in choir or orchestra or visual arts. Those courses are now to capacity. Historically, the administrator hadn't allocated, due to lack of data knowledge, the appropriate amount of sections and corresponding staffing and corresponding personnel assignments to allow that student to have the breadth of choices that they might under a revised timeline.
okay. So, Dr. Sitton, when, under our other agreements that we have, when are the high school principals to complete their staffing needs? When is that due?
They send it back on March 5th, and they
Okay.
get it the end of February.
Okay, March 5th was
Yeah,
the date. I
mid-Feb.
thought I heard.
Yeah.
I heard you say.
And
Yeah.
Ms. Kirby, I think what's also important, and Brian had talked about this earlier today, this also impacts staffing of trying to hire good quality teachers. Because if we can do this early, we can get quality teachers that are available to be looking for jobs versus when we've been backed up before and we've added staffing because of these extra numbers, the good teachers have been hired. So it's critical that we get this also so that we can pick the best of the best, and Brian and Nate and Alyssa can hire the best of the best.
Okay, so I have two comments, maybe more questions to confirm my understanding. It would seem to me that in the proposed world of February 21st, documents due, that your packet that you get from centralized enrollment should be complete. You should have all the records in that packet directly from centralized enrollment as opposed to having to go chase them down yourselves. And I think what I heard you describe is that they're not necessarily always complete, that your counselors, your site staff might have to submit records requests to get the appropriate documents. Did I hear you? Did I understand you right?
So let me address that from the centralized enrollment standpoint. Centralized enrollment does not collect the transcripts. Those occur at the site when they ask for the records. The records go directly back to the site. We do not enroll someone if they don't have transcripts. There's only certain requirements that we have for enrollment, and if they bring those requirements in, they're enrolled, and then they go out to the site where then it could take some schools to send a couple weeks to get their files there. So that has always been at the site level to get the transcripts.
Okay, so why is centralized enrollment not required to get those documents?
Well, I think, Michelle could probably speak to this too. We cannot enroll someone because they don't have their transcripts. That's not one of the things that says we can't enroll you if you don't bring us your transcripts. We legally have to go ahead and enroll them even without that, and then the time that they get sent. So it makes it easier, I think, and more efficient if they go directly to the site than have to have them come to centralized enrollment 2 weeks later and then get sent to the site. So that has always remained at the site, getting the transcripts in.
But this sounds to me like a huge efficiency opportunity. And, you know, on first, just hearing this all for the first time tonight, it is overwhelming. I know you live it and you can do it, you know, in your sleep, but it just doesn't seem like doesn't seem very site friendly. Yes, is what I'm trying to say here. Which leads me then to my second question is on the February 21st, if your staffing numbers are due March 5th, and you have to go chase transcripts and talk with these families and determine what their course desires are, how can you do that? I mean, if you have, in your example, 100 students coming in and maybe even 25 of them aren't complete packets, it just seems to me that to do everything you said, and even Dr. Sitton, you said sometimes the schools will take a couple weeks to send the information in. Is February 21st early enough?
So I'm going to answer it from the centralized enrollment and needing the time to process all these. So once we notify them, because we did talk about could we move that date up, and one of the conversations was we have to make sure that we're sending hundreds of parents to centralized enrollment to get enrolled, that we need to make sure that we can get them enrolled with that date. And I'll let you guys answer it from the site perspective.
I think the question is best answered by Mr. Courts. One of the reasons why the 14th would be better, but from the site's perspective, to have the deadline prior to that 6th rather than after the 6th is monumental progress that we're extremely excited for that potential. So to answer your question is, yeah, will we at Arcadia call in 100 kids in 8 or 9 days? Yeah, we will, as long as we know what the timelines are and who the kids are going to be in advance. The other opportunity, I think, too, is as they're activated between the 1st and the 21st, is they're activated, and as they become activated, we won't receive a list per se of 100 students, but they'll come on gradually, and we can address those. And I keep going back to the 100, even though it's just a round number. We can address and have those families in little by little while the timeline is still in place. So does that make sense? So in my 100 scenario, maybe 10 of the families are activated in week 1. We can call those 10 families in, and maybe 25 are activated in week 2 prior to the 21st deadline. We won't get a list of our 100. They'll activate as they come on board, and we can call them in. But on the 21st, we'll at least know how many we need to call in those 9 days prior to getting our staffing to HR on the 6th. So I think I answered your question.
Well, so I know we had this at our last presentation, but I don't remember the number. How many are in district open enrollment? We have their transcripts. We have a complete package. We know where what these kids' grades are, right? So we're really talking the out of district open enrollment kids. How many do we have at the high school level? And that was in our last presentation. I could pull it up, but do you remember?
No, we'd have to pull it up, but you can look at it really quick, Pam.
Estimate it was about 1,500. But I guess where I'm going is the notification of acceptance decision in the new world is February 1st, right? And what does that mean?
That families have been notified, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Sitton, that you have been accepted into the Scottsdale School District. You have until the 21st to come to CEO and accept that position in that school with the required documentation. But at the 21st, going back to, I think what I tried to answer your question is, the 21st being prior to the March 6th deadline is great progress to being after the March 6th deadline.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Okay.
I'm struggling with, I can't imagine having to be you and your staff and chasing these transcripts down. And so why wouldn't we put the burden more on the families who desire to come to us and say, you've got 2 weeks to bring your documents in?
And to clarify, just so I'm fully understanding, that 2-week window is really for high school open enrollment only. Is that correct? It's not like we have the all elementary, middle school piling in at centralized enrollment. It's just our high school open enrollment, correct?
Correct. That's
And
why
that's
we changed the dates. We left the elementary at March 31st and put the middle school at March 15th. But the staffing is most difficult at the high school, which is why we put that the earliest. So we have 1,500 that were in that presentation of the out-of-district. So I just double-checked that off the presentation. And I think the dilemma of putting the responsibility back, and I think we can probably do maybe a better job of communicating that up front to make sure that's what they bring. And it's always that balancing act of, then are we losing enrollment because they didn't bring something in? So I think I can work with centralized enrollment to see what does our documentation say. Could we do a better job of communicating up front to get that copy of that transcript in, to make sure we're really stressing the importance to those that are enrolling to bring that in. So I'll work with Valerie and take a look at what our paperwork, what our website says, and can we do a better job of communicating out how important that is to bring that with them and to have it available, even if it's an unofficial copy of it.
Well, but looking at that 2-week window, I think is a question. I hate to try and be too much of a psychologist, but as a parent, I know almost sometimes the shorter the window, the better. The less likely you are to forget a deadline. The less, as you live our busy lives and things get put on a kitchen counter and get buried, there's a part of me thinking as a parent, just having that a 2-week window seems appropriate for a parent. Say you have to get down to this office by then, and it shores them up. A little less time to shop around, I guess. I don't know if that's a consideration we should be thinking about, but honestly, you love our school. You don't need a whole lot of time to think about it. Let's get enrolled. And I don't know, so I'm leaning towards trying to understand where, if there's such a benefit on the other side of that date for us, where's that great benefit keeping a longer date ahead of it?
So I would love clarification. So you're talking about moving up which of the dates, are you saying?
February 21 to the
21st? And I think part of it just is the volume that goes through centralized enrollment. So we know we continually have students that move into the area on top of it, and we try to stagger things to say, okay, when do we open it up for kindergarten parents? We try to give them a couple weeks so that we are staggering the work and the volume that comes through the centralized enrollment office, so that the wait time for parents and customer service also isn't so long.
But these dates are staggered. It would be February 15th for high school, March 15th for middle school, March 31st for elementary.
But we're just then taking the few thousand parents that need to come in to complete the process all within a shorter window time. So those wait times for those couple thousand parents then is going to be a little bit shorter, moving it to the 15th, then leaving it at the 21st and allowing another week to get that work processed for that volume of the high school parents.
So I guess in a prior life, I used to do business process efficiencies, and I would consult companies strictly on this kind of thing. And one of the guiding principles is you don't let your current structure get in the way of what really needs to be done. And what I'm hearing is for us to achieve fiscal responsibility, which is one of our district goals, for us to achieve Organizational health, you talked about morale and teachers knowing where they're going to be, where they're going to go. We really need to, start this process earlier, which we're doing, and I'm still not, I feel like 2 weeks is plenty of time for centralized enrollment to process the 1,500. How many individuals are in centralized enrollment right now?
There's 6.
Okay, so 1,500 documents divided by 6 individuals divided by 10 days. It seems completely doable. And it transfers the burden to the incoming family versus on our site leaders and their teams who are also tasked with delivering education every day to the students that are currently in their classrooms.
I have a follow-up question. The information packets that they first collect, does that have the timelines clearly described so that as soon as they can take them in November 1st, right away they would know what those timelines are and deadlines?
Yeah, Madam President, the timelines are on the website, they're published, they're in everything that the parents have access to, so they know them up front.
Okay. And the period of time, just to be clear, that parents and students, once they've been notified of acceptance, the period of time between that notification and the time period where they could come and visit and talk to a counselor, how long is that right now under these proposed timelines? When do they start coming in and once they've gained acceptance? And I guess I want to know how many weeks is there between, do you have to actually interview these parents? So they can come in February 2nd. So if they have thank you, Dr. Peterson. So if they have all their documents in February 2nd, is 2 weeks enough time to have them all come in and visit? I mean, my understanding is that they then have a visitation.
Yeah.
If I'm understanding the question correctly, we may need a review of the two processes.
Okay.
Because we've maintained centralized enrollment in our organization as a separate entity from the other component of enrollment with regard to school selection, and a student being assigned, at this case, Saguaro High School, with your tentative 6 course requests for the next school year. If a family is, under the revised proposed revisions, notified on February 1st, currently a high school family would have 3 weeks to come into CEO with that portion of paperwork. And once that student would be activated in the system, we would reach out and invite that family in at that time.
Okay.
Now, the
Okay.
question about the paperwork, although it's cumbersome at the site, I believe the educational documents and the work to interpret and place those documents and even reach out for them should be maintained at the site. I mean, optimally, selfishly, the whole thing should be at the site, optimally. However, that under our current system, I do petition to leave that work at the site, the records request, the contacts of other schools, as if that became a function of centralized enrollment, what may happen due to the volume is greater time delays, and then physically attempting to get those documents to the sites that would correspond with an appointment of a family coming in for course selection. That would be a concern.
Thank you.
And sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Jackson, your light is on.
Thank you for the presentation. Seems to me this makes sense all the way around. Makes your life easier and job more efficient, and it's fiscally responsible and all that. I mean, this is one of those, frankly, pretty easy decisions in my opinion. I guess I'm struggling a little bit with why, I don't quite understand, and this is not a knock, it's a question. If they're asking for 3 weeks for parents to come in, and it's a fine line between, giving them time to get documents together? Why are we micromanaging this? I don't know. I'm just asking if they want 3 weeks. 3 weeks sounds good to me. Is there a real benefit to forcing? I mean, I guess I'm asking that of my colleagues here.
If I can clarify, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mrs. Perleberg.
Sorry. I think I'll clarify at least my understanding is that it's not so much us questioning it's not questioning the idea of, okay, so if we give our parents 2 weeks or 3 weeks to bring in their enrollment papers into centralized enrollment, that's one date, that's one set of time. 2 or 3 weeks that we give our parents for that. It's after that date that once they get that enrollment that we're really looking at. And I mean, what I'm hearing is there's a lot of advantages once that date happens and we know these kids are enrolled and they've brought their documents in and they're enrolled, then you guys get to work and they get to come to the sites and you get to meet them and all after that. So it's more a question, what I'm hearing is a request that we shorten up the time from 3 weeks to actually 2 weeks so that you actually have an extra week to get all that work done once those kids are enrolled.
Respectfully and carefully, that's not a request, as this is a recommendation. However, attempting to answer the question on timelines, that I think organizationally, where we choose to place the process of volume within the amount of time, this recommendation places the volume of processing the first portion of the enrollment in course selection processes, that first enrollment portion over a 3-week period after notification in the CEO division, in places a shorter timeline to complete the course selection and site processes under the current proposed plan. Any adjustment that would be considered from the 21st to the 14th would just allow for a different proportion of that time based on the first or second process of completing the full enrollment.
Mrs. Kirby.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to try to maybe cut to the chase. What I heard you say is all collectively, February 21st is a vast improvement over March 31st.
Yes.
My question is, what's optimal? February 14th or February 21st?
From the site perspective, February 14th.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question since when we have students who leave us and they request their transcripts be sent to their new school, what timeline do we give our offices to answer that request with transcripts?
At Saguaro, and to my knowledge, the high schools, our registrars are extremely responsive, many times sending the records the same day or within 36 hours.
And is it reasonable to expect that, say somebody that might be coming in from out of state or whatever, that is 2 weeks reasonable? To be able to count on other districts to provide that information?
I believe there are some guidelines that govern document transfers between schools, and I'd have to defer that over to legal potentially. But I believe there are some guidelines that document timelines on providing data. And as long as we're able to get the families in and identify the students in the previous school and reach out quickly, we're typically able to turn around the documents in a reasonable time at the sites.
And I guess my follow-up question would be, has this been a real problem? I mean, are we chasing down something that really hasn't been a problem?
With regard to?
With regard to getting transcripts in a timely manner.
Yeah, I don't know that that's been a real problem,
Okay.
but rather to go back to...
We've had a few issues where we've had to go to schools and try to get them to fax us and things and continually bother them, but for the most part it isn't. I think what's important also is let's use Nathan's 100 students. Those families get notified on February 1st. They don't all wait till February 21st to show up with their paperwork. Probably the vast majority of them show up within a day or two because they want to get in the system and get going. So the vast majority of them we see within a couple of days of getting a notification. You might have a few stragglers here or there because they were out of town or didn't get the email or what happened, but the vast majority of them come in early and we get right on them and they're in the system, and every single day the schools are able to go on the system and see live those students, what the process status is, and they can contact those students because that information is in the system. And so you guys get a fair amount of stuff fairly quickly because parents come in and it gets in the system and you get notified. We don't normally get 100 students wait till the very last day to come in.
I wasn't paying attention. Mrs. Perleberg, I guess you were first.
All right, thank you for your patience tonight, because I don't even know how you do all this, because it's hard enough to follow this. So, but what I've been trying to understand, and I think maybe there is some confusion, is that really ultimately the gathering of documents, the gathering of transcripts, really getting to meet and greet the kids, really starts after this, after the enrollment documents deadline. Is that right? That's when you guys really can get to work. There is some work able to get done prior to that deadline as people roll in early and stuff. But it really is the bulk of your work can't really start until that due date hits and you know what you have. Is that accurate to say?
Yes.
So again, we're looking at that question, in my mind, is if the 21st is great, but the 14th for you all is awesome. And I'm trying to understand, again, the disadvantages to shortening that time frame and giving you all that 14th, that extra week. I'm trying to find the disadvantages in doing that within that 2-week time frame that we're really looking at from when those when parents are told you're in and they have to bring those documents in and that deadline. So that's what I'm trying to fully understand. It's true, I'm not exactly sure who's answering that question necessarily about that little 2-week window or 3-week window.
Yeah, I think the initial discussion was just around the volume going through centralized enrollment, because it's not even just you're out of districts, but it's also those that want new open enrollment within the district that come in. If they want to, they can come in and show their proof of whatever they have for the new change. So it was about making sure we were providing customer service, not having the long waits and processing, 1,500 people with the 6 people out there versus a site that may do 300 with their office staff to do it. So it was just taking a look at the customer service provided at the centralized enrollment and not having so many of them and the long wait time.
Mr. Brown.
My gut tells me that I'd rather have staffing be right. I mean, I think that's huge right now. Give you guys more time to figure out staffing. Now, hey, Sean, is this any great shakes? Is a week huge? Pam, is this huge, a week for central enrollment? And could we beef up staff for a week? That's really all we'd have to do, right? Is just to throw another couple of people in central enrollment for a couple of weeks or for a week.
Yeah, I don't think we have extra staff to put there because of the process being, they have to really know the process. That in the summertime when we're busy, we have staff at the schools that don't work 12 months. So we can hire some summer help to support. But during the year, there wouldn't necessarily be anyone that's trained in that process to come help with that. I think part of it is it might limit the choice of what the students have. So if they have their staffing set by March 5th, and they have a student come after that, and I think Mr. Court might have talked about this, then the choice that the student has may be limited to say, well, we didn't know that you possibly wanted this class. This is where our staffing is. This is an elective you may have to take instead of having that choice up front.
But if it closes, if it's closed anyway, then there are no choices after that.
Well, it may be that we allocated 2.0 towards fine arts and 1.0 towards something else, and fine arts is full. So you still have a spot for them. It just might not be in the elective of their choice. Because you might have flipped it if you had your course
I'm just talking
requests
about
sooner.
cutting back a week. So I don't understand where the choice thing comes in, because it's a done deal. Once we made it a done deal, it's done. They're accepted. They walked in. Boom! I got my paperwork. Here I am. Boom. But it gives them more time to get square up on staffing, doesn't it?
Well, because it is about that student choice. They want to go ahead and to see their transcript, to see what classes they're going to take, to get a course request, to see what choice they might want in it. Then that helps them do their staffing to say, how much do I allocate towards fine arts? How much would I allocate towards world language type thing? So, I mean, that's how it impacts staffing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking the sooner the better, but I'm still back to that kind of. I would rather have the principals have more time to really take a look at who's coming in and how to staff it properly. That's my gut. And is that 1 week going to be critical mass on central enrollment? I think information and communication is probably key right now on that from the central enrollment site to expedite the process, to make it cleaner, make it faster, make it easier at central enrollment, so the principals then have more time to figure it out.
Like a lot of things, this is always more complicated than it seems. One of the goals that we have been talking about a lot is increasing enrollment. And I'm wondering, does that week, would pushing it back that 1 week and making it more difficult to get the documents in for the parents, would that impact increasing enrollment overall?
So I think another thing to remember with these deadlines is if we have more on the list, even though the deadline comes and someone doesn't come in, we go down our wait list. So if Arcadia 9th grade happens to have, I'll pick a number 200, since you said you're taking 100. If we had 200 that actually put it in, and then some didn't make it in time by this deadline, we go ahead and start accepting the next person on that list. So you're always going to have numbers that continue to trickle in even after that February date.
So this is it's not a hard deadline. It's not you're here by now or you're out.
That's for the initial. They do lose their spot and give it up to someone else on a wait list should they not meet that deadline.
But they're not.
Yeah.
There's
Yes.
still someplace.
Yeah.
Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. As Board Member Brown was talking a few minutes ago, I had flashbacks of Budget Committee, where we always talk about centralized enrollment as a budget reduction item. And in those conversations, we did talk about, and you might have even been at some of the meetings, just the transactions. And I just did the math, 1,500 transactions, 6 people, 10 days, 8 hours a day. It's 3 transactions per hour. And so when you think of it that way, it's not terribly overwhelming. And to Board Member Brown's question, maybe we can't add more bodies because I get the training piece of it, but could we seasonalize their work schedules so that in the heavy time they might work 10 hours a day, and then in the lower times of the year when things not much is happening, maybe they're working 6 hours a day, and flex it a little bit that way to put more hands on deck.
It would be overtime that we would end up providing during that time.
So,
Yeah.
But I have to, if they're hourly, I have to believe that overtime for 2 weeks is minimal compared to the potential staffing savings we might realize.
I have one more question. Can you help me understand why there's, since this portion is so scrunched down, why is there between December 15th, and I understand that there's winter break in the middle there, so we lose 2 weeks, but there's 6 weeks between the enrollment applications being due and the notification of acceptance. But yet when it comes down to crunch time with doing the enrollment and getting the transcripts, we have half that amount of time?
We do start kindergarten enrollment for our in-district students in January. So we have other enrollments taking place outside of open enrollment.
Oh,
So we kind of
okay.
stagger to try to stagger that work so everyone's not coming in at once. So we have a lot of schools that will start kindergarten roundup in December and January, and we encourage them to come in during that time when we know no one else is coming in, so that we have it staggered for that purpose also.
Mr. Brown?
Okay, I'll complicate things. I mean, why not? Could you move the February 1st back a week?
You know, I'd have to talk with Valerie Pleasant if that would make a difference, or if it would just run into the kindergarten enrollment that's going on all of January, and what that would do. Yeah.
But the kindergarten enrollment, though, is for the whole district, not
Right.
just the open enrollment. So
Correct.
that's a huge
That's the
number.
entire district. We're doing
Right.
kindergarten enrollment. I mean, and the other thing is, when I meet with Valerie, is notification is at February 1st. So if she thinks that it could go back, we could do it prior. We just can't do it later by the board policy. So I'll make sure I have that conversation with her. They could always notify prior to February 1st if she doesn't believe it will go into the kindergarten time window with their registration going on. So I'll have that conversation with her.
Mr. Jackson, you were next.
I know everybody's super well-intended here, they are, and we want to support you folks, and I hope that's clear here. But are we solving a problem that doesn't exist, which we tend to do? Are we looking for a problem that doesn't exist? Or it seems like this whole thing's a huge improvement over the current dates. And is it possible we could move forward with the outline proposed, see how it goes, and if you feel like it was crazy busy for trying to get your staffing done in 2 weeks, we can make an adjustment down the road. But I would hate, like Dr. Sinton said, these are we're balancing things here. I would hate to create long waits for new folks coming into centralized enrollment. That's many times their first exposure to SUSD. And we don't want to lose enrollment. I don't want to lose enrollment and unless I'm missing something here. Dr. Sinton, help me here. That's essentially that is, if there is a downside to moving that date up, that's it, correct?
Yeah, I believe
Okay.
that it just the customer service that provided, because we do have all the kindergarten enrollment happening, and then it becomes all of the high schools that we're trying to get through. I do agree that it's definitely an improvement over that March 31st deadline and helps with the staffing. And then, Mr. Court, did you want to add something?
I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot, and
Yes.
certainly,
No, thank you. And the intent of the principles here is to celebrate and support this adjustment. So let me be clear, please, by no mind was an intent to modify a recommendation for action to the governing board, but rather to endorse the timeline adjustment, both with regard to open enrollment and the subsequent work being done in district committees with regard to staffing and personnel placement. So if the example I gave on that date, in an effort to explain the different components of the multiple step enrollment process, led to a perception of an intent to modify this recommendation, that was not my intent.
thank you for clarifying.
However, but to clarify the importance of a window that allows appropriate student placement, which I believe deserves additional conversation in a different venue. But with regard to timeline, there are repercussions functionally to limited time to notify families, get them into the site, do a records request, interpret the records, and have course selections, and still meet the deadlines to provide allocation of staffing to human resources and associated personnel.
Mr. Brown, I believe you're next.
You know, George, I'm with you. I think maybe we're trying to over-engineer this. Like maybe we should take this existing timeline with, and then take a look at the performance of all parties after we've completed this first go-around, this first year, and just be open to adapting at that point. Just see where we are, see how we're doing. But, you know, every time we turn around, we're bothering somebody else. So now I'm going, yeah, I'm kind of pulling back. My gut is to live with this and be open to modifications moving down the road.
Mrs. Kirby.
Sorry, thank you. You said you support the recommendation. Is this, Dr. Peterson, is this a recommendation that collaboratively came out of the meeting with the principals?
I would say yes. Brian was pretty adamant that, and some of the other principals, that they would like to get that crunch down as much as possible. The original date that was presented to them was February 28th. They said, we need more time. So everyone looked at what could be done. Mitch was communicating back and forth between principals and things, and based on the input from enrollment and folks, February 21st. So it moved from February 28th down to February 21st. Brian still, and the other principals still felt that as much time as possible that we can give them, we need to try to do. Can we live with this? Yes. Can we try to tweak it? Yes. And we had that discussion this morning at LAT, and Brian and Nathan were there, that just kind of what Board Member Brown said, this is a whole lot better than where we were. Let's work with it, see what it is, and if we need to make another adjustment, we're open to making another adjustment. But right now, the key is November 1st is coming very quickly, and so that's why we wanted to get in front of the board to get it approved so we can get notification to parents.
Okay, which I'm going to pull a Board Member Brown, which leads me to a follow-up question. We heard from 2 communities tonight about addressing the priorities. And you addressed the Cheyenne group, although as I'm reading our current policy, it refers to Choya and Oak Pre-K, and I don't see where our current policy supports what you communicated, although I completely agree with what you communicated. So my question is, if we move this date up to November 1st, can we still come back in the next few weeks, next month in November, and discuss the priorities of open enrollment for this enrollment season?
Oh, yes, we're going to do that. Matter of fact, we are scheduled on Tuesday after we come back from October break for LAT to have that discussion we're bringing principals in, elementary, middle school, high school principals, to have that discussion so we can bring recommendations back to the board for that discussion.
So the information packets that go out in the proposed November 1st, they don't talk about priorities. They just have deadlines.
Well, I think the policy's in there because someone wanted to look at it would look at that. We can put in there that those things are going to be examined, and we can put that note in there, but that's the current policy that we have. And so if somebody were to pull that policy up, they would say that. I can tell you in the policy that was attached here, where it says status of open enrolled students, on page 36, it does say, this includes students who are enrolled in a Scottsdale Unified School District pre-K program the previous school year, where it talks about once they're in, they're in. So it doesn't specifically say Choya or any of it. It says the pre-K school program. So if the program is located at a specific campus, it's covered.
Okay, so again, though, can you confirm for me that we will address the priorities in our policy for this current enrollment season, and potentially they are open for discussion and potential modification for this current season?
Yes, that's our intent.
That, I would ask Michelle Marshall, is that legal to change the policy after the season opens, the priority piece of the policy?
I guess it would depend on what we do to change it, because parents are going to start doing the enrollment and looking at what the policy is, and if they're relying on what we're saying our prioritization is going to be, and then we change it midstream, we are going to have some people cry foul. We can certainly change it, but we certainly would have people who saw what it was and have something to say about it.
And our next meeting, I believe, is November 13th.
13th.
So we could bring that and have that discussion so that we could put something in there. The packets, enrollment packets aren't due back till December 15th with the calendar we're proposing. So that does give some time there. They go out November 1st, but they're not due back till December 15th. So that would give us basically a month of them knowing, and we could have something on there. So I think we could put, as it goes out, that priority will be discussed and
Subject to
approved
change.
on the November 13th.
Do you agree?
Yeah, we can do that.
So we can put a disclaimer, priority subject to change prior to December 15th?
Yes, and then I would recommend we communicate.
Over-communicate
Yes.
that.
Yes. And would we be able to include like a link so that anybody can check at any point in time?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can I have a motion, please?
Can I remind you that we need you to move to waive your second read and then either accept these or modify them as you choose.
Mrs. Perlerberger.
Before we, I think, decide to waive that, I just want to make sure you feel we have a really clear understanding of what we need to understand before we make this vote. And I mean, I understand this date's not probably going to make or break anything, or these dates. I'm understanding that. I guess I'm just always looking for that balance and that dialogue that can be a win-win situation for everyone. So I understand that this February 21 date and that time frame is a great improvement. I would love to be able to support you all in what's really the best practice, the best choice. And for our students, for those classrooms, for our teachers, because really that is the priority. I respect our parents and their time, and I know it stinks to have to stand a lot of line, but we all know that it's that classroom that's our priority here. So I just want to make sure that everyone here, centralized enrollment, our principals have that voice, that you feel we are all clear on what we need to do that's best for our students. So that's all I'm going to say.
Based on the comments, I sense the board has a clear picture of the ramifications of any decision within this proposal. And then I'd suggest that any decision made by any leadership level has organizational health repercussions.
Well, I have a question. Could we, for this year, change the proposal from November 1st to the day after we meet next? If the board, first of all, let me see if we have consensus as to whether or not we're going to waive having a second read. Let's try that first. And if not, then we'll change that date.
I'd like to make a motion that we waive the second read.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? I'm sorry? Waiving. Right, right. And not necessarily these dates, but make the decision tonight. That's what we're deciding. No, right now, the motion on the table.
I have my light on.
We have a first and a second on the table. Is there any other discussion? Ms. Kirby?
Thank you. I want to respect the principal's work and the timelines and the recommendation. And I'm not trying to delay necessarily the November 1st. I understand what we're trying to accomplish. My hesitation is, my experience, 6 years on the dais, is it is a very bad idea to write policy from the dais. And that's sort of what we've been doing here tonight, is trying to write policy on the fly the very first time we discuss it. I have more confidence in that we are getting input directly from our sites. But I feel like there's several unanswered questions that there could be unintended consequences.
Mr. Jackson. Discussion.
I don't disagree, but this is important that we move these dates forward, and I think I'm fully prepared to do that. I think we could, some of the tweaks that we've talked about, whether the deadline is the 14th or the 21st, pales compared to the overall benefit, so I'm fully prepared to move forward. It is an imperfect process, but this is a heck of a lot better than where we are. So you're not, Board Member Kirby, you're absolutely right, but I don't want to hold up this process because I think these tweaks we're talking about are minor compared to the benefits that we will receive from this, and we can adjust this. It is imperfect to do it this way, but the benefits are outweigh that, in my opinion.
And Mr. Brown, discussion on the motion on the table.
No discussion.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor of the motion to waive the second reading, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. That motion carries 5-0. Okay, now the next discussion, so that satisfies that. So the next discussion would be, I had a question that I proposed. Could we hold off on making the information packets available until after our next meeting?
The next meeting is November.
Although with the 5-0 on the waive, we probably don't need to do that, but I'm just asking if that is possible. I know that would put us almost 2 weeks behind.
It's possible.
I think it's possible. I think it's just communicating out to the parents when they're available and when they expect they're available, to be available for them.
I also think, and part of that November 1st deadline, Madam President, members of the board, is that we were looking at some of our competition and when they are sending things out, and we did not want to lose any ground with them.
Mr. Brown.
Can I make a motion that we accept the current proposed dates for open enrollment?
Is there a second? When you say current, do you mean the proposed? Is there a second to that proposal? If we have a second. I'll second that. So now, is there any discussion before the vote?
Yes, thank you. Great point about the competition. What school districts have moved their dates up?
Pam, we had looked at that. Some of the charters that we are competing against have those dates out there. We can send you the other ones where the actual dates are. But I had looked, and some of the charters had those dates.
Ones.
I'll have to go back and pull them. I don't have my notes sitting in front of me, but I'll send that to you, the board.
Is there any further discussion before the vote? Ms. Perleberg.
I usually like to get a little more confidence built up in a vote, but that the conversation about that February 1 date, possibly being able to move up, and if we are considering kind of treating this year as a test to see, one, we know it's going to be beneficial to our high schools and to our staffing for to move up that to February 21. But I guess the question is, if it is possible, if things can actually come in prior to February 21, and there is a possibility that that February 1 deadline for enrollment notification can get bumped up and start that early trickle in. Yeah, I mean, is there any benefit in that? Can we kind of use this year as a kind of a test on how much we can push our centralized enrollment, and how close could we get to that February 15th date in practice, and then come back for next year? Is that just all too much work or too much to hope for?
Yeah, well, I think what we probably should take a look at is we can track the numbers to see where they do come in. How many come in that first week we open it up versus the second week versus that third week. So we actually have the numbers of, so are there that many that actually go all the way to the 21st? I just really want to have a conversation of when that kindergarten enrollment is, if we're going to push up that February 1st, because we are talking at a large number of schools for kindergarten enrollment, and every kindergartner comes in with enrollment, so it's a large volume of students. So I just really want to check that before we would, I don't want to commit for Ms. Pleasant to push up her February 1st date, and then she's telling me, you know, she's got 3 weeks worth of kindergartners coming in for the entire
Right.
district.
Well, and I think I wasn't thinking of putting that in stone, or
Right.
moving that February 1 update and put it in stone, but more of a kind of an understanding on the inside, like you said. Let's see what we really are able to do and how those dates could be flexible as we move forward and in the future. So is a compromise, I'm thinking, but okay.
Discussion, Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. Can you remind me again what the motion is that's on the table?
The motion on the table is to accept the open enrollment policy timeline changes as proposed.
Will there be a separate motion to qualify in the enrollment documents associated with this timeline the priorities? Or do we need to amend this motion to ensure that that disclaimer that we discussed about priorities possibly being modified is included, along with this timeline?
Madam President, Board Member Kirby, that's not necessary for your vote. We can just take that direction and put the notification in there.
Memorialize it with a vote?
It's not, well, you can, as a board, give us that direction and we can do it. I don't know that a vote is appropriate.
Since it's not on the agenda?
I'm trying to figure out what the vote would say that's noticed.
It would simply to accept these timelines with a disclaimer on the open enrollment packets that the priorities may be modified.
You could do that vote,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. So is that a new vote or an amendment?
Well, let's see, what did we have? We had a motion and a second and discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Do we?
We have to vote on the,
Right.
the motion and the second.
Or amend it.
And it would have to be
So-
someone that made the motion.
Right.
I'd like to amend your motion, Mr.
Or
Brown.
you're a college. So I'd like to amend my current motion to include a disclaimer indicating that dates, priorities could change,
That works.
but the November 1st date holds. Can I do all that without the November 1st date holding? No, I'm kidding.
And I will second that amendment, or proposal with the amendment. Mrs. Kirby?
Sorry.
Okay. So all of those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion
Thank you
passes
all for your
5-0.
patience. Thank you. And thank you for being here. Thank you so much.
The next item on the agenda is action item C, 10C, approval of governing board district goals. Will there be a presentation, Dr. Peterson? Dr. Peterson's going to pull up the goals that we talked about. We've talked about these over a series of work studies.
Where's Danny? Does he? The final goals that were.
We have notes from last Thursday. Do we have anything, okay, finalized? Sent to Steve or not? Danny, do we have a final document after the notes were taken on the clipboard? Okay, and I don't have those. I don't have the final document for us to approve then. Well, yes. Yes. I would like to table that discussion. So we get the final document in final form. I know. Let's do that. Is that okay, Michelle? Since we're talking about the approval and we would have had discussion anyway? Okay. We know. One of one of the things that I would like to discuss is the goal number 4, the neighborhood schools. This is something that I think after seeing what happened tonight, that I'm finding that this might be a goal that we want to talk just in a work study with our principals, with the people that are going to be affected, so that we can have more clarity and make sure that we all understand what direction it is meant. When I look at the rest, I see clear and concise and simplified messages that I think everybody can understand just by looking at them. I would like us to use the idea of number 4 goal to work with our principals, to have meaningful study sessions with give and take from both sides, and to spend that time clarifying exactly what the expectations would be. Part of the reason that we're doing goals is to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we understand what those expectations are. So I would like to say that I could support everything else, but I think the neighborhood schools thing would be a wonderful opportunity for us to begin dialogues with the people that would be directly involved. Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. Actually, after the comments tonight, there were several key components where I think we're in violent agreement, actually, with the principals. But something has been lost in translation, I think. I know. Something has definitely been lost in translation. And so your suggestion, I think, is a great one. I value, as a board member, any opportunity I can get in the same room with the principal. And I wish we could do more of that in the district.
I agree.
And we had a great discussion tonight. It was a little tedious, but it was the first time we had ever talked about this, and right. I do appreciate their time. But I think that's a fabulous idea.
Mrs. Perleberg.
First off, absolutely agree with that comment. It was a bit heartbreaking for me, and I'm sure all of us, to feel that the intent that we have been working towards in this goal, and as we've defined it over the last few months, has somehow been messaged out there or just been twisted, misunderstood, whatever, to interpret it as some sort of dismantling of our district or removing supports that help our principals. We've all gotten to know each other pretty well, and especially in these discussions, and never once was there any effort to take away supports of our principals, to not support our principals. So when I hear statements, and I am sorry that we got to this so late and our principals had to leave and not hear what I feel is a very important clarification in this goal, and I hope this message does get to them. Look forward to an opportunity, a work study, where we could discuss this goal in more detail, because the clarification in my mind, and I was writing some notes down as I was listening to the comments, is that, again, the thought of removing supports, dismantling, all of those things is nowhere in this discussion in my mind. It's nowhere in this goal. When I look at goal number 4 and really trying to just define it in its simplest terms, it really is the commitment that when we ask ourselves, and in this building, how do we best serve the needs of our students, it's the relationship between the educators and the site leaders at those campuses that drive our decision making. I feel that's truly the intent of that goal, is that relationship, which is so critical, between our educators at our sites and the community that they serve, and the site leaders that help and that work so hard to serve that community, that their perception, their understanding, their connection with that community is what's driving our decision making. To me, when you look at all our other goals as well, the idea that important relationship and that connection is really what builds trust and confidence and commitment to SUSD as a whole. When you have a strong relationship like that, and it is one built on responsiveness and collaboration, and that's what builds those of us in this community that love SUSD so much. That's because we've witnessed that type of relationship. I certainly, with my children's elementary school, that is the type of collaborative relationship that we had with our campus. It's a wonderful thing. We do have it in this district, and all I see as goal number 4 is embracing those communities that have experienced that and working hard to bring that to all our communities. So I hope that message kind of can get out, and I do look forward to an opportunity to meet and collaborate with our principals directly so that they understand we're here for them. So thank you.
Mrs. Kirby, I believe you were next.
Thank you. You know, what might help this conversation with our elementary principals is a real-world example of at least what my vision is and what I'm getting at with this particular goal. I had the opportunity this week to attend a COCOPA APT meeting, and they talked about rigor in their honors program and how it was embraced by the entire community, the teachers, the district, the APT, and it was a very much a community-wide effort that gave COCOPA the identity it's been looking for many years, quite frankly. And I got chills listening to the presentation because while that's a program, and we talked recently that doesn't have to be a program, it could be a culture, that is what they've done at COCOPA brings this goal to life for me. And so it's a little esoteric as it's been written, but I know that COCOPA is very proud of what they've accomplished. It is a work in progress. They feel very supported by the board, by district administrators, by their community. And I would just suggest when we do meet with the principals, the elementary principals, and talk about this goal, could we bring in the COCOPA representatives to share their story? Because for me, that's what this goal embraces.
Mr. Jackson.
Since we're on number 4, I'll just jump in real quickly. I agreed with everybody about, I love the idea of having each school develop their unique culture. I mean, how could that not be a good thing? But on the other hand, after reading this and hearing comments and talking to administrators and principals, it's clear that someone could read into this a decentralization underlying theme on this goal, and that is, I have no interest in that, going down that road. Not if it's going to, if there's certain campuses that's not going to help, and I think that would ultimately be the case. Certain campuses, I think, probably would be fine with that. Others, we have a very strong unified school district, and I think that's why we are so successful. So I definitely want to continue to meet and discuss number 4 because I want to be crystal clear that I support a strong unified school district. I have no interest in decentralizing this school district, and I think a strong unified school district is what makes us so strong. So I agree we need a lot more discussion on number 4. So thank you.
Mr. Brown.
I think it's very important for the principals and the board to sit in a room and demonstrate trust and show that we encourage your vision of your community school. I'm not an educator. There's no mystery to that. I'm not asking anybody to create a school in my vision. but I want those principals to know that I support your community vision for your school. I want your community to know that your principal is with you and we're with him or her. Now, with all that said, can we go ahead and approve the other 4 goals or 5 goals? 6 goals, 5 goals, and move on down the road with those?
Do we have the final draft in front of us?
Well, I believe so.
30th? No, we don't.
This was my note.
Oh.
Goal 4 was what was changed.
Okay. Because all the other goals were very, very close. I did want to add to the discussion, and I'm glad to hear that the board is eager to talk with the principals. I think some of our best meetings have been the work studies where we've had the principals around the table, and the leadership team as well, so that we can pin this down in the name of simplicity and clarity and understanding, to make sure that none of our schools of choice feel left out in this discussion, and that nobody feels like we are going to violate any open meeting law, or not open meeting, but open enrollment laws, and pinhole students to just their neighborhood. I think that might be an unintended consequence into calling it the neighborhood schools. And these are things that we can understand a little bit better if we listen to our principals and administrators and make sure we're all on the same page on that. Is the board comfortable with the handout approving everything except for item 4 for our goals? And this will be, if it's approved, the final document will be shared on our website too, as soon as we can get somebody to put it up there. Okay. I would like to, that it would be, once the final document is approved, then we will put it on the website.
So we would wait until our clarifications, our discussions about item 4, we would wait to put all of them up.
My proposal is that we go ahead and put up the document with all the other ones, and then we have our discussion with the principals until because it could, again, when we try to come to some common language that everyone can accept, that could be a lengthy process, and I don't want to hold up the other goals.
So you think, as far as the language that we were working on last Thursday for number 4, I take it we're kind of saying some of us are not comfortable with that language any longer, and even though there's still obviously more discussion that we have and clarification and fine-tuning of this goal, we've reached, some of us aren't comfortable with this current language. That goal, is that my understanding? Okay.
Mrs. Kirby.
Is it that we're not comfortable with the current language or with the goal itself?
Is the language not being interpreted, and does it need refinement? We've talked about it. Ms. Perlberg brought up that people have interpreted it differently than maybe we intended it. So with everyone in the room truly getting on the same page with the goal and the principles and all the concerned parties. So is that
The goal or language?
I don't know. Let's get in the room and ask.
I think this, as written and as interpreted, has a lot of concern out in the community. So I'd like to table number 4 until we've had these meetings to, like we talked about with the principals.
I don't disagree. I'm trying to understand, by tabling it, are we looking to clarify what we mean by this goal and clarify through potentially different language? Or are we looking to punt the goal altogether?
I don't, either. I mean, I think my intent is to, I like the idea of allowing campuses to foster their individual cultures and all that. I mean, but not at the expense of creating a lot of concern in our community amongst principals that, you know, we're trying to decentralize and that they're not going to get this. So I think this school needs a lot of work to make sure it possibly we do punt it, but I'm fully prepared to.
Yeah, I'm not sure where this decentralized concept came from, because nowhere in this language is that word even used.
I think the principals just need to hear from us, and we need to hear from them and get on down the road with this.
Well, if I can, I didn't hit my light, but sorry.
Okay,
here's where my mind's rolling a little bit. Going back to my earlier statements, when we do talk about what the true intent of this goal is, and I think we were really confident leaving Thursday that we really had fine-tuned it. We did understand what we weren't trying to do with this goal and what we were really trying to do with this goal. How can I say this? I was very excited when we reached that level of understanding, and I felt enthusiasm for this goal because, as I said earlier, I think this type of connection that it's all resonated with us. I think every stakeholder I have spoken to, this true intent resonates with them, finding that decision-making process or where those decisions are being based out of is that connection between the student and our sites. That resonates with our community. I'm trying to think how I can say this legally. That type of enthusiasm and connection with our stakeholders seems very important right now. And so I was quite excited to get that idea out there for the near future considerations. Michelle, are you going to tackle me here any second? Okay.
Yeah, I will.
Do we understand what I may try to be saying here? I guess that's where I'm trying to let go of that enthusiasm that I was feeling on Thursday, because I said I'm heartbroken over the misinterpretations and kind of the lens that our principals are looking at this through. But I feel we all left here really excited Thursday because we have a positive message for our community that I feel will resonate with our stakeholders. So I'm trying to balance that all tonight as we move towards this vote and removing that from the mix and putting it out there in public without that. I'm trying to let go of that positive message in my mind. So I'm just going to put that out there for discussion.
And in no way would I suggest that we, in fact, I think this is an excellent example of learning how to listen to the people that are going to be implementing this and making sure that we reach our goals, which would include the principals, the teachers, and the administration. I mean, they're the ones that can help us and probably come up with ideas that we haven't even thought of. And because we have such a diverse community, I think it's important to maybe utilize this particular goal as something going forward, not scrapping it, but something going forward to make sure that the true message is simple and is clear and is transparent and is truly something that's district-wide. I think that's what, the board is here to make decisions that are district-wide. I think it can also go toward everything else here, and I think the professionals can come up with even a better idea or maybe clarify it even more so that nobody feels like this doesn't pertain to them. Brown, I think you were next.
I think the bottom line is the word that's been tossed out a lot is trust. And we have to instill trust in our principals that they understand our intent. And I mean, that's the bottom line. The principals don't feel like they're trusting us right now that this is really what we're seeing, that there's an underlying deal. So let's all get in a room and clear it up and move forward in a positive way. As you said, it has been a very positive few months. And we came from a different place. We have to continue this positive conversation. We have a lot of things hanging out there that are very, very important to the district. Let's get in a room, get positive, be truthful and honest in our intent, and then we'll get buy-in. And let's demonstrate that to all stakeholders in this district.
And Mrs. Kirby.
Thank you. I agree with what you said, President Sneed, and you were talking about teachers and site administration. I think one critical stakeholder that was left out was the actual community we serve. And they need to be in the room too. The communities, maybe it's our PTO presidents, or maybe it's our site council reps. It's an open invitation beyond just internally focused. It should be as well externally focused. And I agree with Board Member Perleberg. This idea has had strong support, even from the schools that I think Board Member Jackson is concerned about, and what's been communicated to us by one or two stakeholders is the South Scottsdale schools. They feel, what I've heard loud and clear from South Scottsdale schools is what we're doing right now isn't working as well as they would like to see it. And so this idea is intended to benefit the entire district. And in no way is it intended to decentralize. It's intended to highlight the strengths of each of our individual communities and build upon and leverage those strengths as one Scottsdale Unified School District.
Thank you for that clarification. I would like to make, I can't remember now if the motion was out there already, but I'd like to make a motion that we approve the goals that are before us with the intent to further clarify and include our community and principals and administration in the further clarification of number 4. So I would like, actually the motion is to approve all goals except number 4 at this time.
Second that.
All of those in favor, please
Aye.
indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. I believe, is that 5-0? Okay. And I think it'd be very exciting. We haven't undergone this kind of a community
Madam
event.
President, members of the board, could I ask, when would we like to get this meeting together? Do we want to try to do it at the work study that we have coming up, or do we want to schedule another session? Because I think it's important we get the word out, and whether it's site council, PTO, whoever that represents those other campuses, so we can get those folks involved.
Yes, we have a work study scheduled for the 13th. No, November. Mm-hmm. And do we want to begin with the principals, since they were so vocal tonight?
Rather than drag this out with multiple meetings with different stakeholders, let's make it open invitation. Anyone who has an interest in learning more about this, and definitely the principals for sure, but not exclude anyone.
Love it.
I like the PTA, PTO, APT, whatever. maybe a site council.
Yeah. Well, I
Okay,
think,
well,
yeah.
this meeting is scheduled for November 13th during the day. Do you,
I think they'll send a representative who can be available, and they'll have input prior to then,
Principal.
so
But
we
if
can
we're
get,
asking
we'll
the
get the word out.
principals, can we make it in the evening? We're asking principals to come, or would they prefer the day?
I think
What would our
principals, for
principals
something
would
like this,
prefer?
I think principals would come in at noon, and they could make that work. And we'll ask them, and we'll, if we need some other coverage, we'll make sure that that occurs for them.
And
This
you'll
is-
and
this
you'll
is
note
vital.
that we were thinking of them when we
Yep.
scheduled this, right? Okay,
Yep.
cool.
I mean, this is vital. We need to get this done as quickly. So I think it's important that we get it done and get it advertised and get the folks in here.
thank you very much. Future items, board members may propose topics for future consideration. I heard the open enrollment policies, and then, of course, our goals with the goal number 4. Anything else? Ms. Kirby?
Thank you. I want to reiterate, I would like to have as a board presentation, and maybe at the November 13th meeting is the right place to do it. Or before that, if we have another board meeting, that the principals can watch regarding what COCOPA's done. And I did talk with Ms. Thomas and let her know I was going to be requesting this, so she's not caught off guard. It was a absolutely fabulous presentation from the entire community. So.
Well, and I mean, to that point, I wouldn't just single out COCOPA, even though it's been fantastic, but we do have several examples. Pueblo, throughout our district. Cheyenne, I mean, any school of choice really, to me, embodies this kind of theme. Cheyenne, Pueblo, and ANLC and all of that. I encourage everyone to come.
COCOPA just has a presentation ready to go.
Dates of upcoming meetings, Thursday, November 13th, 2014, at 12 noon, there's the study session. And Tuesday, November 18th at 5 o'clock is a regular board meeting. Thursday, December 4th at 12 o'clock, study session. Tuesday, December 9th at 5 o'clock, regular board meeting. Are there any governing board reports? Mr. Jackson.
I'll be real brief. This is not really a report. I was at Mojave Middle School about a week ago on Friday afternoon and picking my son up. Anyway, there were over 50 students doing robotics in Mr. Taveld's science room. It was a beehive at about 3:30 on a Friday afternoon, and they were working on all different types of robotics. And anyway, it was just kind of an amazing thing. So we are doing a lot of wonderful STEM programming in this district, and that was just an example on a Friday afternoon. And these kids took their Friday afternoon to do this. You couldn't fit another kid in the room. So anyway.
Right, and that's a great example of our partnerships that we have with our community, getting in there. Mr. Brown.
I just wanted to say I had a great time at Hohokam last Friday for their carnival. Good turnout, beautiful weather, great fun. It was great seeing some old friends. That's it.
Thank you very much. At this point, make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Thank you very much.